Hello everyone, Man Avengers here, and it's time for the Cool Board. And today we have a very special guest. We have the one, the only, the large and in charge, Mr. Quakemz. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It feels like a bit of a reunion, which I'm always a big fan of. Obviously, I'm part of Top Clack, something that Huey used to be affiliated with, and yeah, we go way back. So we like to have good times, and we keyboard a little bit here and there, and we're what you might call keyboard boomers as well. So you know, show in the works.
Certainly a good way of putting it. If you are new to the show, this is the Cool Board where we take different keyboards and we use the rule of cool to judge how cool they are. The rule of cool goes from the left where we got yikes all the way to the right where we got wow. It goes left to right priority before it goes down to up priority. We have quite a bit of boards. We've done already, I think, 6 episodes of this season. For this episode today, what we're going to do is actually review some of the topics that you and chat and myself have talked about and see, do they deserve to be where they are? Should some items be less cool than where we've placed them? Should some other items be cooler than where we placed them? And we're going to find out today with the help of Brian. So let's get into it.
Sounds good. I hope I can be some sort of assistance. I feel like I hope people don't hate me on this show too much because I have a tendency. I'm going to preface this right now, guys. I have a tendency to enjoy keyboards more than other people, and I tend to be, at least these days, less critical than others as well. My baseline for decent keyboards is probably a bit lower than what other people might consider. So I just want to preface that before everyone gets mad at me for liking all these keyboards. With that said, yikes everything.
Yikes everything.
Put it all in yikes.
Let's
This chat hates everything. Well, I think it's fine to be critical, right? I do want to point out, I think as on an individual level, I think it's totally fine to be like personally critical about a keyboard or whatever. But for me, I'm just a little bit more open-minded. I'm a little bit more accepting. I try not to be too hostile towards things I don't like.
That's definitely a good way to start. I think there's quite a bit of hostility these days. A lot of unfounded hostilities.
There is. There is. Yeah.
It's okay. Well, chat, you can get it all out today, okay? You can exactly tell us what you think is bullshit, and
we're all here together, and we can all have valid opinions.
Well, some are more valid than others. Let's leave it at that.
All right, we're starting off this way. Let's go.
Okay, let's just start off with the top.
Okay, are we going through every board on the wall?
We're going through everything, Brian. We're going through everything.
Oh my! Is this going to be like a 12-hour stream or what?
No. Because
it took you 6 episodes to get all of those up there already, right? And we're gonna go through all 6 episodes. I looked at your VODs before. They average about 2 hours. Are we doing 12 hours of streaming here?
My feeling is a lot of things probably won't change or will change very minor.
That's probably fair.
I think chat and myself have been mostly right moving through this, but I think there's a few corrections that could be made. I think. So let's see.
Look, opinions changing based on new perspectives and information is the human way, right? That's how we learn, that's how we experience, and that's how we evolve. If we always think we're right all the time, every time we do everything, and we never change or learn, then you're probably not in for a very good life, in my opinion. So I think it's kind of cool that we're revisiting things like this.
Yeah, and no, don't worry, Sake. I'm not even gonna do wow to yikes. We're gonna go back and forth. We gotta close in because it's a bell curve. So we're gonna go from wow, then we'll go to yikes, and we'll look at the middle. We gotta look at both ends first because both ends are where we get the least amount of the highest chance of having an outlier.
Okay.
So wow category. The coolest things, obviously, other than Gatoron. Gatoron isn't moving anywhere.
That's auto wow. Let's be real.
Auto wow. TGR Alice Jane V2 CE.
Wow, what a place to start. Obviously, TGR, one of the biggest names in the community. And one thing I really do respect about this show and this format, Huey, that you do is this type of format not only kind of lends itself to kind of like a casual, almost game kind of sense, but because of people like you and who you are and the kind of experience that you've gained throughout the community, is you're actually able to give a lot of history and notes on these products, which is cool because it often becomes kind of like a history lesson, and usually people learn something in it. So that's why I freaking love the cool board, and I'm stoked to finally be here today.
Thank you, thank you. Okay, so we got these two boards. Both of these were first come, first serve. The Alice sold out, I think, within 2 minutes, whereas the Jane V2CE sold out within 43 seconds. I think both of them still deserve to be in WoW. I think they're both amazing boards. I still have my Alice. I don't have my V2CE anymore. But even like the Alice, like, okay, here's my argument for why the Alice should always remain in WoW. While people may hate all these millions of Alice clones in existence. A lot of them are good. Some of them are boring and derivative. But they all exist because of the goodwill that Yutzi had to publicly and freely release the layout files for the Alice.
Yeah.
He never had to do that. He could have just been like, no, it's my layout. It's my layout. And he said, no, I want the community to have this layout and see what else the community can do. Here's my take on this layout. Do as you will. And of course, nowadays we have like the 65% version with the little arrows on the side. Some people have moved those nav keys to the right side instead of leaving them left. But the board itself, it uses the 5052 aluminum, which is a softer aluminum, more of a satin feel to the touch, which I actually like. I don't think many people use the 5052 aluminum often. He also has a really, I don't know who his anodizer is, but it's amazingly soft to the touch as well. I know some people don't like some of the TGR boards because it's not seamless. There is a seam, but usually the tolerances are really good where it's not like, it doesn't feel intrusive. It just feels great. And the Alice had brass plates default option for polycarb plate, option for a RGB little acrylic layer, which, come on, people buying the TGR Alice aren't using that.
It's not 2016 anymore.
This is not 2016. The PCB, I don't know why this always is nice, but he uses just a classic green PCB.
Yeah. I mean, okay, I think there's quite a bit to unpack here, honestly, but like, I think, like, kind of like you're alluding to, I think kind of regardless of how people feel about like the Alice layout and even just the Alice board, and the same could be said about the Jane V2 as well, but like, TGR is just kind of undeniably cool in the sense that it's influenced so much, right? Like, our community would look differently today if not for these two boards in particular. I mean, the Jane series in general, I guess, and the Alice series in general, not necessarily just the V2CE. But I mean, look at how many TGR Alice derivatives that we have now. There's just so many, and it's like its own thing, right? The layout is just so popular. That influence just wouldn't really have been there if not for the Alice. And I feel like the Jane is kind of the same way, though it hasn't spawned as many derivatives. Look at how many boards that are out that are pretty much, very similar in the way they actually perform, right? A lot of them use the same mounting style. Heine TKL1 being one of them, as well as, the Moon, I think, also uses like the same plates. Yeah, so a very, very classic, elegant, custom typing experience, honestly. I don't think there's anything particularly incredibly amazing about them. I've built these boards before. I've used them. I've never owned them, but I've built and used them before, and I think they're wonderful. But they're not really like groundbreaking in terms of typing experiences, right? It's just a really, really nice high-end premium custom keyboard. And I think in that sense, it's not necessarily a wow, but you can't deny the influence that TGR has had on the community because of these two boards. Influence alone, I think they probably have to stay in the WoW.
Yeah, I'm with you. I don't think anyone. I don't know. Does anyone in chat think they should be either lower in WoW or not? Okay, if you think they shouldn't be in WoW, like come on. If you think it should be lower in WoW, I'd love to hear those reasons though.
Yeah,
because
definitely.
I mean, at least among everything we've covered, I think it's definitely. Thanks so much for the sub, Tony. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, even so, the only thing I say is missing, which I'll probably cover in the future, is just the Jane V2. I think the Jane V2 actually had a bigger influence on the community than the V2CE, but people just love that rainbow, Tolbarone of the V2CE. And some people like a lot of people in the community who are into custom boards or higher end custom boards are into the artisan scene, and that F13 that the Jane V2CE is just that's the artisan key. You put an artisan there. You get one because you want a dank board for your dank artisan, right? Like,
and it's totally fine too. It looks nice like that.
Like I feel like you're only rocking the Jane V2CE correctly if your artisan is worth as much as the Jane V2CE.
Yeah. With that said, now that I've thought about it a little bit more in real time, I do think specifically the CE version should probably be a little bit lower. I think the Jane V2 should definitely be up with the Alice in WoW, but the CE maybe a little bit more borderline towards cool. Personally, because like you were just mentioning, the normal V2 does have a lot more of that kind of influence than the CE itself has. And you could also, like someone's been bringing up in the chat, the group buy length and just kind of that whole thing with the way that the V2 CE has been handled. Is a bit of a knock against it too. I mean, the group buy has been going on for quite some time. Several people still don't have their units. Is it really a WoW board?
Yeah.
So, but that's kind of the interesting thing about the cool board, right? There's so many things to take into account. How do you quantify cool? Is it the group buy? Is it the product itself? Is it the influence it's had? There's so many variables to consider, and that's another reason why this show is kind of next level, and people don't really realize it.
Gawk, I'm gonna. Usually, I agree with most of your opinions, Gawk, but I actually think you're wrong about that. If you ask the average enthusiast what's more familiar, the name OTD or the name Jane, people are gonna choose Jane like 4 out of 5 times. I'm pretty sure.
I think a lot of OTD stuff is pretty high up there too, honestly.
Oh, for sure.
If we're being real.
Yeah, no, we're being real. But I think
definitely not a knock against OTD.
In terms of like design influence, I think Jane is at least a bit more recognizable. But OTD. When I eventually get to OTD, it will be WoW as well.
Yeah, like OTD and like KMAX stuff, like that's like super OG, and there's no doubt that stuff is like
all that stuff is so cool
and very influential as well.
So amazingly cool.
Yeah, but I think a little bit more towards like the modern day. I think the Jane and the Jane V2 is just so impactful on the hobby at large.
Yeah. I think the only thing I'll change is I'm going to leave room between the Alice and the V2CE to eventually put the V2 when we get there.
Okay. So it's towards the top is better and towards the right is better, right? Top right is how it works. That's the coolest.
Right top.
Right top, yeah.
So like the Alice and Jane V2CE, they're more rights than the HHKB Pro Classic, which would be the next sub-tier basically of coolness.
Gotcha. So which is cooler right now between the Jane V2CE and the thermal?
The V2CE. It's more to the right.
Okay.
Right, yeah, right takes priority before you.
Right takes priority over height. Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
So yeah, I have both of those in like the highest tier of cool at the moment, and I think that's where they're going to be We're going to belong for quite a while. I think there's definitely going to be other boards that belong in that tier, and if anything, I think the Jane V2CE will probably move down within that column, but it's going to stay in that highest column. Is what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
For the future. Okay.
That seems fair to me.
Yeah. Okay. Under that, between like the rest of the WoW stuff and the Jane stuff, I actually put the HHKB Pro Classic.
Interesting. The Pro Classic. The Pro Classic is the newest iteration, right?
Yes.
What you might unofficially call a Pro 3.
Yeah. What would you unofficially call a Pro 3?
Okay. I have still yet to use one of those boards, although I know that you were telling me it's actually pretty darn good. I mean, it's in the WoW category already, so obviously it's pretty darn good, I assume.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
Man, I wish I could have more of an opinion on that, just because I haven't used one. I mean, there's no arguing that HHKB as a whole is, even more influential and impactful than something like the Alice in our community, right? HHKB is just big.
The way I see the reason I want, or I think the HB Pro Classic should be so high is because unless you're a collector, the HHKB Pro Classic basically just keeps building on everything great that people have loved about HHKBs. Unless you're a collector, there's essentially no reason to get the Pro Classic versus the Pro 2. Unless for some reason you're weird and you like micro USB more than USB-C. And if you're that person, see a doctor. You have a condition.
I'm pretty weird, but I'm not that weird.
So so the HJB Pro Classic, it's just PFU Fujitsu just building up on what they're great at.
Yeah, and see, this is where this kind of angle of the cool board comes in and is really interesting, because obviously the HHKB Pro Classic, in of itself, is like nothing like influential, right? Because it comes from this long line, this long lineage of influence. Thanks to Iwata Sensei, and like the original HHKB stuff. So like the board itself is not very influential, but like it's just an awesome OEM board, and I think that's probably reason enough. I mean, again, I haven't used it, so I don't know if it should be ranked this high personally, but I take your word for it. I know you've been using HHKBs probably longer than I have. I definitely trust your judgment on this one.
So my main argument isn't even like the quality of the board, which is there. It definitely as an OEM board is amazing, but just the whole history and everything of HHKB behind it. Because remember we had a period in our hobby where if you're in the 60%, you got to at least try the HHKB, right? There was a whole 1 year span where anyone who was into 60% had to have at least tried an HHKB. People would argue and meme about loving or hating the HHKBs.
HHKB used to get so much flack. Do you remember that? Like the amount of arguments that used to be started over Topra in general.
Oneness with cup rubber.
Was insane. Oh, I forgot about that line. Thank you so much for saying that. No, but really though, like it even happened to me. I remember arguing about Topra with people because people are just, it's a rubber dome. Like, why don't you just buy a Dell? Like what makes you think every rubber dome is the same? Like, is every MX switch the same? Is every keycap the same? Is every keyboard the same? Like, what kind of logic is that?
Yeah.
The reality is it a rubber dome keyboard? Sure, you could argue that. Is it way better than like every other rubber dome keyboard? Yeah, probably. Because it's just a way higher quality product. Big surprise. Rant over, I guess.
No one. I guess things are different nowadays. No one in chat is thinking is saying if it should go higher or lower. So I'm gonna keep it.
I don't know. I trust you on this one. I wish I had more input, but I just haven't used one yet. I do plan to buy one though, for what it's worth.
Lack29 says, "Do you think Topra has grown with the growth of the community as a whole?" No.
The community quite the opposite, if anything.
Yeah, the percentage of people into Topra nowadays is way smaller compared to how it was 5 years ago.
Yeah, like Topra used to be like, I don't want to use the word cult, but like Topra used to be kind of like its own like niche. Not even niche, but like a big section of the hobby. Like you had people that specifically just used Topra, and they would argue with people that specifically use MX, mainly because MX people were like highly elitist, and they're like, rubber dome, like give me my cherry ergo clears. It's like I get it, but like, can't we just like both things? Because I like both things.
Yeah, exactly. It definitely had its own basically, quote unquote cult following, and there's definitely a lot of argument about that, and that kind of defined its identity, and I think overall in a good way. Streaking Bison, if you're gonna buy a Topra board tomorrow, what would it be? Look at the available Topra boards, look at the layout you like, and if you want to go with like a big board, the Leopold 980C. If you want to go with HHKB, that's also a great option. The new Real Force Round 2 TKLs I've heard are decent. I haven't tried them.
I have one behind me. I love it. It's my favorite OEM.
Good.
It's my favorite OEM. Yep. It's my desert island board. Give me a 55 gram Real Force Round 2. Let me put a little lube on there. I'm set.
55 grams. So nice.
Yep.
So.
There is Niz and Plum, says Nebula. We don't talk about those.
Yeah, we don't. Those are.
Actually, that's unfair. I think there are some cool things that they've done. Just not all of them have been very successful.
Yeah. Yeah. Talking about things that have been successful, the next column, we got 4 boards, and I think some of them are actually going to be moving out. We got the thermal.
Interesting.
So these are all in like the same column, so they're in the same tier of coolness. They're just ranked from thermal to HPCP to Bauer to Juby.
Okay.
I would argue.
Oh man.
Personally, I don't think the Bauer has aged well compared to these other boards.
The Bauer did a lot of things right, though.
It did.
Look at that bottom row, for example. That just looks great.
Yeah.
I think that's one thing. Another thing it did is the build process was just so amazing, right? The gaskets already applied. The build process is so seamless. It was really a joy to build, and like it almost didn't matter what switches you put in there. It made you feel like the build came out pretty well. It was a very forgiving board.
Extremely.
I don't think it was like insanely interesting, but I do think the aesthetic is really nice, and I think it was a fantastic board to build, and it did make a lot of people happy. And it did, because of this, it spawned the upcoming light version with the injection molded case, which I'm super interested in because I like high value keyboards. With that said, I probably wouldn't personally have the Bauer in the WoW category either, or if I did, it would probably be riding the line between cool and WoW. WoW to me needs to have like a lot to justify, and I'm not sure the Bauer is quite at that level.
Yeah. Sokka, is this like a precursor to 65? No, 65% have existed way before the Bauer. The Bauer is nowhere new to the concept of the 65% keyboard.
Definitely been out for a while.
Yeah, I would honestly just throw it on the high cool, like near the edge between cool and WoW.
It's definitely at least high cool. I agree with that, if not bordering onto to WoW.
Okay, let's see what else we have in this column, because we have on the highest of this column, I have the thermal, which I don't own. I regret not getting onto the group buy. I think it looks beautiful.
I think it looks gorgeous, and I think Wilba, despite him and I have definitely butt heads in the past. Both of us tend to have kind of abrasive personalities, but that aside, I think the thermal looks absolutely incredible, and I really like the kind of leaf spring mount that he went for. With that said, I have actually not built or owned one of these, or even used one. I've never used a thermal, which is kind of a bummer because I do think it's a really interesting board. I've heard some mixed things, more skewing towards the good side than bad. But definitely seems really cool. In the WoW category, that seems a little high, but again, like I said, I haven't used one. I do like a couple things about the thermal, though. Not only the mounting system, but also the follow-up to 65%. A lot of people were split on that because they changed the design, right? Instead of having the kind of grills or whatever you want to call them, the slots on the left and right, they have them just on the top. I thought that was a really bold move, and that was super cool. But yeah, I don't know. I wish I had used a thermal.
Yeah,
they sound really interesting whenever I listen to one, but typing tests are kind of a meme anyways. So
we can do a whole fucking 30-minute boomer talk on typing tests.
We kind of did before we went live.
In the pre-show, yeah. If anyone was in the pre-show, that was the pre-show.
Before we went live, we were talking about typing tests. And,
so the thermal got here because of the audience for that episode, and like I also haven't built the thermal, and I haven't used the thermal personally. So I don't have the context other than I love the idea behind the thermal, and I love how it looks in terms of it being cool. But
I have never been disappointed with a Wilba product, like a Wilba design product, and I doubt I would be disappointed with the thermal as well. So yeah, I don't know, but I mean sometimes you gotta defer to chat too, right?
That doesn't mean
like,
it's WoW. It doesn't mean it's at
WoW.
least decent, right? It means it's a decent typing experience, but
it's true, yeah.
Doc says he's used a thermal and it's pretty polarizing. Interesting.
That's what I've heard as well. Some people not as thrilled with it. Some people seem to really like it. I guess that's probably true for a lot of boards though. But like Iwade is asking, would we be wowed by it? Because the WoW is a pretty big deal to me, right? Like, I feel like WoW isn't necessarily reserved for keyboards that are just good, right? there has to be like something more. Like what's extra special about the thermal? Because it can be a great typing experience, but does that necessarily make it a wow keyboard?
Mm, mm. I think okay. So let's hold our thought there on WoW for thermal and if it belongs in WoW. Let's look at the remaining two,
Okay.
the HBCP and the Juby. I think the HBCP should be in WoW. I think as a big board, it's one of the best big boards, especially
Yes. Oh yeah.
especially when you get the half plate FR4, which is my build from my HBCP. Absolutely fucking phenomenal.
I completely agree. I have built and used a couple of these, and I particularly am in love with the kind of purple polycarbonate version. My God, that is just straight fire. And typing on one of these really is amazing, and it kind of invokes. I don't know if he would say this, but to me, like a lot of Heine's work is like he keeps that very kind of classic, like classic kind of aesthetic and typing experience that you'd expect of like a really nice custom. It doesn't blow you away necessarily. It's not groundbreaking. It's not new and inventive necessarily, but like it's just the simple shit done super duper well, and it just embodies that like really really clean, elegant, effortless typing experience. And that's what I love about not only the HBCP but also things like the Heine TKL1. And I mean, he even designed the meme, which a lot of people just forgot about and don't talk about anymore. Sort of understandably, but you know, the actual structure of that board was very good. HBCP, I think, is no different. I think it's a fantastic board, and like you mentioned, one of as far as big boards go, it's got to be one of the best ones you can get, hands down.
Yeah.
For typing experience alone, this has to be at least high
Yeah.
cool ordering on WoW
I'm
for typing experience alone.
I think it should just stay in WoW. Honestly, I think thermal and Bower, we're gonna move it down to the cool and see where it ranks up in the high cool. HBCP stay in WoW, but I'm not sure about the Juby. I haven't actually used the Juby. I've never seen it in person, so I don't know. So this is definitely a chat deferral.
Yeah, I'm with you. I have not been lucky enough to build or use or own a Juby, but I know this board has been was in the works for many years. I remember even seeing just like crazy like early renders of it many years ago back in the Key Chatter Slack, I think.
Okay,
Um,
so chat. Level with me, chat, okay? Chat, close your eyes, okay? Close your eyes, chat. It's a beautiful spring day, okay? You enter a door and there's a lot of people talking. You open your eyes, you see tables full of keyboards, full of people with artisan containers, people trading keycaps with each other, trading switches. You're walking around, looking at keyboard here, looking at keyboard there. You see the 60%, but it has a weird thing on the side. It has these two macro columns full of artisans. What do you think about this board, chat? Just imagining it on this situation.
Interesting.
Does
Yeah.
seeing something like that, if you saw something like that at a meetup, would that interest you? Would you be like, huh, what is this 60% with a tumor on its side?
This board is plate mount, right? Or is there or not plate mount? I'm sorry. This board is PCB mount, right? Or is there actually a plate for it?
I do not know or remember.
I feel like I recall it being PCB mount, which to me is extra cool points because I like PCB mount these days.
I believe there's a PCB mount option.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. But I mean, being in the WoW, is this something? Is this really like a WoW board? Is this to me? WoW has to kind of like it has to do one thing, or it has to do at least one thing. It has to either change the way the community looks at keyboards, or changes the way that you as an individual look at keyboards. I think those things are kind of necessary for WoW. The Juby though, I'm not so sure. I mean, it's gorgeous. It seems like it had some decent options. I
Top
recall the
mount,
price being relatively reasonable.
it was top mount or gasket PCB.
Top mount or gasket PCB. Okay, so gasket PCB. That's kind of cool.
That's the kind of the only option. If you read to me top mount or gasket PCB, I'm gonna choose gasket PCB. Why would I choose a top mount between those two options? I've used hundreds of top mount boards.
Yeah, but I mean, okay. Other than like a potentially the PCB gasket mount, what as an individual Huey, what wows you about this board? Does anything actually jump out and go like, wow, that's really interesting or amazing or invocative?
I like the front lip, but I don't care about the macro columns because I'm not an artisan person, and really only artisan people use that. People tell me, oh, well, you can reprogram. Come on. No one actually reprograms their artisan columns for useful shit. Let's be real. And if you do, you don't actually press them. You program them once, and you've never actually pressed them. People who have those. Come on, let's be real with me, everyone. I forget. I know.
This is another one of those boards where I feel like, as like a typing experience, as like just the keyboard it's probably very good, right? Like you're probably gonna type on it, and you're probably gonna be like, oh, that's nice. But it's probably not gonna change the way that like you type on keyboards. It's not gonna change the way you have like this perspective of the community. It's not gonna change the way the community is, right? I feel like it's just not that kind of board, and maybe for that reason alone, I'd probably put it, maybe a little bit lower, a little bit like towards higher cool, perhaps.
Okay, but yeah, I'm kind of with you there. Thermal, Bauer, Juby, moving to somewhere in cool.
I feel like, I mean, maybe it's just chat, but I feel like people are too quick to put things into the WoW category just because they're nice. I feel like a nice keyboard, a good keyboard, is not a justification for WoW. WoW has to really be like something extra special for one reason or another.
Well, let's look at the next thing that might be special for one reason or another. The modern Model F. One man's effort of 5 years to bring a reproduction Kish Saver to existence with regular updates, consistent delays, sending springs to metallurgists to find and chemists to find the exact chemical composition of a 1987 spring.
Do you own one of these? You were in the group buy, right?
I do own one of these.
So you have one of these right now. Okay.
Yeah.
I very much remember a lot about this board. I remember how long the group buy was, and I remember a lot of the ups and downs. I do not have one of these, but I know you and I tend to share opinions on a lot of typing experiences, especially when it comes to a lot of the vintage stuff. How do you feel about that board?
It's fine.
The typing experience is fine. The board itself is fine.
It's fine.
Okay.
I just don't want to rob the man 5 years of actual human effort.
Well, I mean, the guy did a lot.
That's the coolest part. The effort that Joe went into, the story. If you told this, you could make a mini documentary of the modern Model F's journey from conception to shipping.
The product
legitimately could.
Yeah, the product aside, the group buy itself was legendary, right?
Legendary.
It's the kind of group buy that, your kids are going to be talking about, Huey. But okay, even if let's be real. Even if the board is just fine, this could still be a WoW product, right? There are other variables to consider here besides just the raw typing experience. However, I would be less inclined to put it in WoW if the board was kind of disappointing. I mean, to take a page out of your book, Huey, close your eyes. It's 2015 or whatever, and you're joining. You see the group buy go for this, and you join it, and you're like, oh my god, that's absolutely incredible. Like I love IBM boards. I love the Model M. I love the Model F. Capacitive buckling spring. I have wet dreams about, Huey. Like unreal. Like this has to be good. And the guy behind it is putting in so much effort. And year after year, you're waiting. And the guy is nice, and the group buy seems like it's progressing, but it's now 5 years later, and you get the keyboard, and you're stoked. You finally get that tracking. It comes in, you open it, you press a few keys. It's fine. Is the keyboard WoW?
It's about the journey and not the destination.
And you know what? That's valid. That's what makes the cool board interesting.
That's the story of the modern Model F. If the modern Model F was a board that existed and it had a 6-month turnaround time, hell no, this wouldn't be in WoW. And if wasn't Joe and everything Joe did to get to this point, no, it would not. But the effort, work, updates Joe put in is will not be passed by anyone in the community doing anything even similar to this at all in any capacity for the foreseeable future of this hobby. Period. I don't think anyone's gonna ever do this the work that Joe did.
That's probably
I
very
think
true.
It's absolutely unique and amazing. I put a solenoid in mine just to make it even more obnoxious too.
Yeah. There's no doubt that it's a cool product, right? And like I said, legendary group buy. It's ridiculous. It was a journey, and it's totally valid to be a WoW keyboard, even if the typing experience maybe not the greatest of all time. So I guess I have to defer more to you on this one, but to me, maybe it's a little too high in the WoW category for just having like an epic group buy alone.
Well, real quick, everyone, here is it with the. I don't know if you guys can hear the solenoid, but. Oops, you guys probably don't want to hear that. Hold
Uh
on.
oh, Nebulent clipped something. I'm scared. I think I know exactly what he clipped. Please.
There you go, everyone. That is the board I waited 5 years for, and it's one hell of a board.
Yeah. I mean, at the very least, right? It's a really cool collector's item, and it's like a piece of the keyboard history to remind you of, different days of the hobby as well.
Yeah,
there is certainly a lot to be said about this keyboard, and a lot of it honestly pretty good.
Could you imagine if the Model F started today and still took 5 years? Imagine how people would feel next year if it was an actually year 2 with this current hobby's environment. Actually impossible for this board to come in fruition except for when it did actually start.
Yeah, this would not sell the same way as it did back then. And judging by a lot of the current, keyboard community, I think the group buy runner or vendor doing it would get a lot of hate and probably death threats if it took that many years.
No, it's in low WoW, and I think it should stay in low WoW. I think it's.
I can agree with low WoW.
That is where it is, because there's only one board lower than it.
I think if you typed on this board and you were like, "Holy shit, this is also amazing," I think then you could probably put it pretty high in WoW. But if the keyboard is just fine to type on, I think low WoW is as high as it can go.
The keyboard has its fair share of annoyances because of the angle of the springs and the flippers. Whenever you put on keycaps, you have to tilt the board a certain way. Otherwise, the spring won't go in correctly, and you won't get a proper buckle.
Ugh, yeah.
So like when I take out and put in keycaps, I have to hold out like this angle to do it. It's not a perfect board by any stretch, but of course that's based off its, that's just, reimagine old, well, not reimagine, let's just remake old technology based off molds that no longer exist.
It was a sweet project, though. I mean,
oh, hell yeah. Hell yeah. So, the last thing we have on the WoW, the 7V. One of the best 75% in the world.
I mean, it's also one of the most hyped boards currently. A lot of build streamers, a lot of content creators doing a lot of streams and videos about the 7V. Aesthetically, it's gorgeous, right? I mean, I know a lot of people like to meme that, like, oh, like, it's normal now for every 75 to have, exploded arrow keys and, exploded macro column or whatever, have a badge or whatever. But you can't deny the 7V is really tasteful, really, really aesthetically tasteful. I think the weight looks lovely. The badge in the top right. I'm not usually always sold on badges. I think the 7V looks awesome. The color options were stupendous. It ran through Novel Keys, if I remember correctly. So I mean, it ran through a great vendor. Gok's a great designer. I mean, it's a fantastic keyboard. It seems like I still haven't built or used one, so I'm not one of those cool streamers that
I know
That's
the
going along with
feeling.
all the hype. Do you have one of these? Have you
Nope,
built one of these yet?
I've never touched one. I've never built one. I don't own one. So Jeff was actually in the episode talking about that, and he wants to reiterate his main argument, which was it was an open group buy, and for the most part, I'm sure you haven't heard any, no complaints about the quality,
I have not heard a single bad thing about the 7V
despite
ever.
the fact that it was unlimited.
That's pretty impressive. Yeah, I
That
mean, there's and
is
like,
extremely
yeah, I
impressive.
mean, like I was saying, I ran through novel keys. There's something to be said about a well-run group buy. It was, the time seemed to be all right too. The turnaround time was reasonable.
Musa, see, you have a clarifying question for WoW. Is aesthetics enough for WoW? Well, it depends on you. It's based off your opinion on what you think is WoW, and it's just kind of a collaborative argument with everyone together on is it actually cool enough to be a WoW, based off what you may value more than someone else.
Yeah,
Because
you can quantify it
for
different
me,
ways.
that quality thing is pretty goddamn cool to have that many
Yeah,
units existing with basically no issues. Really, that's like publicly aired and amazing. That's pretty cool. I think, yeah, athletically, it's probably the cleanest 75%. I'm struggling to think of one I think looks cooler right now. Any come to mind, Ryan, that actually look cooler than the 7V?
that look cooler than the 7V. Oh my gosh. 75 is like, I gotta be honest, like probably my least favorite layout, so I tend to care very little about 75% for
The
the most
only
part.
the only board I can think of, and it's not even the full board. It's one aspect of the board, which is the lion weight on the Singas.
The Singa's, I mean, yeah, the Singa's pretty
No,
iconic.
I'm talking about just the lion weight. The rest of the Singa, man, just this, just the weight part is the only thing. Like, for example, that would save it for me. That I think is cooler than anything in 75%. But
I mean, yeah, that's fair. I can't think of another one that I think is as good. No. I do think, oh man, I really like the Allison, but the Allison is kind of different and hasn't run publicly yet anyways, so that's kind of like a bad metric.
yeah,
Uh no, I think this might be like the pinnacle of 75%, at least aesthetically for me.
Big O, aka Osiris, says, I think it delivered about 2 months late, even after the shit show of 2020. That's impressive, damn.
That's impressive, yeah.
No quality. Yeah, that's actually amazingly impressive. If it's only 2 months late due to 2020, open group eye, no issues.
I would say saying the Ayla looks pretty nice for a 75. I think the Ayla looks nice. I mean, it looks nice. It looks fine. I'm not totally sold on it. I think the 7V looks a little bit better personally. But obviously that's, we're just arguing personal aesthetic preference at this point, and no one's really right or wrong, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But like the mounting styles of the 7V was pretty interesting. The internals are pretty cool. I mean, it's a really nice looking board. Incredibly successful group buy. A lot of newer people to the community probably don't think it's as impressive that it was unlimited and didn't really have any issues at all. But when you've been around in the community for a while, when you see stuff like that, like it really is super duper impressive. It honestly is.
That gets the boomer stamp of approval for me.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very successful keyboard.
I think if we have to give a 75% a WoW, I think it has to be 7V. I think that's
Is there any other 75% in WoW?
no. That's the last WoW item.
Okay. And just because I want to pose this question for this as well to anyone, because I'm sure there's probably people in chat that own a 7V. There were so many of them. It's likely. What was the typing experience like for you guys typing on it? Was this like your favorite board? Was it the best? Was it incredible? Did it change the way that you think about typing? These are qualities I think it's worth pointing out. Because if you built this board and you're like, it's fine, right? Like, should it still really remain in WoW? But I mean, it seems like it's been received quite well. So,
And hey, if you flipped it, let me know how much you flipped it for, because I'm definitely curious for the aftermarket price versus the market price or the retail price.
I have no idea what
I,
they're
I
what they're
have no
going
idea
for right now.
what that would be either. Yeah, because I'm sure even though it sold a lot, I'm pretty sure it'd go for a lot, which kind of is a tell of like communities optical perception of like cool in a way almost.
Yeah.
Okay, while we wait for chat's answers, I'm gonna take a piss real quick.
All right. Sounds good. All right, chat. What do you guys think? I want to know. Have you guys typed on a 7V? I'm sure some of you guys in chat have typed on a 7V. What is it like to type on? Is it like other boards? Is it kind of expected, even if it's good, or is it something totally unique? Is it something totally different? I enjoy typing on my 7V, and the aesthetics give me lots of feels. Okay. Streaking Bison, then. To you individually, would this keyboard be in the WoW category? Would this be the WoW 75%? Does this have that kind of impact on the community, or is it just a cool board? Hello, Osiris. I think Huey went to pee is what it sounded like. So here I am. I love the flex. Yes, WoW. Okay. Streaking Bison agrees it should stay in WoW. I've heard a lot of people talking about the 7V, but don't really get it myself. I mean, it seems like a really nice board, but I feel like, and Huey probably would agree with this if he were here as well, but I feel like the longer you've been in the community and the more boards you've built, the more you kind of realize the differences between a lot of boards aren't as large as a lot of people make them out to be. And that's always something I consider with keyboards too, right? So like for me, it's less about like how good a keyboard is and more about like how different a keyboard is, because I think variety is really important too. If all the keyboards, even if they feel good, if they wind up all feeling kind of the same, what's the point, right? Then you're just kind of, it's all about the aesthetics, and I mean, aesthetics aren't terribly important for functional typing experiences.
So what's the chat consensus?
Well, chat's really upset that I'm here.
Nice.
Kidding. Probably kidding. I was kind of picking on Streaking Bison because he seems to be one of the few people that owns a 7V. He believes it should stay in WoW because he likes the flex for the typing experience as well as the aesthetics, giving him lots of the feels, he says. So for at least one of the 7V owners in chat, this qualifies as a WoW keyboard.
Well,
let's see. High cool / low WoW says 8 IDL. Okay.
Reverberate, not really interested in 75% boards, but the 77V is the only one I want to have. Interesting.
I feel like that would be the mark of a WoW keyboard, right? If you have someone that isn't really into 75% at all, but they're like, I need to buy this board.
Yeah.
I feel like that's going above and beyond just being like a nice keyboard.
Yeah. Okay. I think we're gonna leave it there, and we gotta go to.
I think low WoW is fine. That's fine.
The yikes zone.
The yikes zone. We're jumping over. All right. The probably arguably the most exciting zone. Okay. At least in terms of content creation.
MD650L.
That's okay. I remember that episode. That was the one with the ML switches, right? Or the MYs.
Yeah. ML switches.
I mean, both are terrible, but yeah, MLs. Oh my gosh, I remember my first Cherry ML keyboard, and I remember before I got it, you were like, "It's gonna feel like typing on a wet newspaper," and I was like, "How bad could it be?" And then I got it. It was pretty bad. I think I paid like $15 for it, and I think I sold it for like $5. Like I lost like $10 on the situation, as well as some of my soul, because typing on ML switches was just that bad. This is undeniably yikes. I don't think there's any moving this. I think this might even be the pinnacle of yikes, I would say. ML switches are really just that bad, and I have no idea. And I think I even said this, when you were doing the episode live, but I want to meet the guy that was like, this is a good idea, send this through. Like, I want to meet the guy that decided this was how this keyboard should feel and perform. Because that guy has never typed on a keyboard before, and he's probably never even typed on this keyboard before. I think Mistel has some interesting products. This is kind of a fail. Anyone that's used ML switches will probably be in agreement. It's just bad. It's a very low-profile switch, and it's way worse than any of the low-profile options that we have on the market right now.
And for me, the reason I put this so low in WoW is not even just because I should have talked about this more in the episode. It's not even just because of the switches and how bad they feel. It's because of how much effort they put into this board that turned out so badly. I mean, which does, of course involve the Switch. But think about it, they actually like wanted to do a proper split keyboard. Like they don't have they didn't compromise and put the FN like all the way in the left instead of that control. It's actually a proper split 65% layouts.
It's a pretty reasonable layout, all things considered.
Right, they have the LED notification on the bottom, pretty close by, easy to tell what layer you're on, and if you have caps on and stuff. Good location, very low pro discrete. It's a pretty overall slim package, wireless and split. They put so much effort, and then they cocked it up with this Switch choice.
Yeah. It's also worth pointing out that the previous iterations of the Mistel Barocco actually weren't that bad. You had lots of different Switch options. It looked all right. It had a pretty reasonable layout. This particular one, though, I think you were talking about some of the highlights, aside from the obvious Switch choice debacle. But I think for the Switch choice alone, that is enough to be full yikes, because the typing experience is just not gonna be good. Yeah. And for that's to me at least, that's a cardinal sin of the keyboard. Because, like, first and foremost, you want your keyboard to feel nice, right? Like, sound is great. People love to talk about sound. Aesthetics are great. People love to talk about aesthetics. But at the end of the day, you're physically interacting with this device, and if it feels like shit, that's just not a good feeling, man. Just that's a true feels bad.
Yeah. Okay, I want chat to take a look at here's the main yikes. Not looking at the ones that are straddling the edge. Chat. Okay, we got the Vortex Race, Alpha 28, Magic Force 49, X-Bows, Minivan, Gherkin. Okay, chat. Are any of those topics you all want to challenge to say why they shouldn't be in yikes? Because that's what we're actually here for. Are any of those items that shouldn't be in yikes?
I would probably challenge one or two of these, actually.
Okay, hit me.
The Alpha 28, that's like a meme, right? Can you put a meme in yikes?
I
mean, don't get me wrong. Like, I don't want to type.
I don't think it's a cool meme. For example, I think the Pain 27 is a cool meme, hence it's much higher.
That's fair. The Pain 27 is a more interesting project than the Alpha, because the Alpha 28, I guess, is probably less of a meme. You're right. It is probably designed with a little bit more functionality in mind, perhaps, but it's not a typing experience I would like. But oh man, it's kind of hard to put it into the yikes category, I feel like, because it's like a highly custom layout, right? Like
Brian, look, the glowing LED isn't even in the middle of the board. It's not even aligned properly.
So give me the quick rundown on the rationale of why this ended up in yikes to begin with.
I just don't think it's cool. Like my whole MO.
Well, there's a difference between something that's not cool and something that's yikes. Like yikes needs to be the counterpoint of wow, right? So yikes has to like there is like it has to go above and beyond just being like not a good keyboard, right? Like there has to be like really, in my opinion at least, like really definitive reasons why this is just so terrible. It makes people want to say yikes when they see or type on it.
That too, you insert key as space whatever you want that to be. The fact that they took the QWERTY and they changed the actual key spacing, because if you look at the first two rows, they're ortho.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. The layout does seem quite bad. I'll give you that.
The layout is atrocious.
It's pretty rough. And honestly, a lot of this here, I'm just trying to play devil's advocate because like I see something like this, I don't actually care. Like I would never buy or use one of these. Like this is, I see it and it's just like it's already past my brain. Because it's just very, very much not for me. But you're right. I mean, LED kind of off center there kind of doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to me either. The layout being partially ortho, partially staggered is probably a leading factor of it being bad. Does anyone in chat daily drive one of these? Do you guys own one of these? Do you like them?
I do not believe a single human being daily drives an Alpha 28.
I try to be a little bit more lenient with stuff like this because like there might like I don't know who designed this layout. Maybe this really works for the guy who designed it, right? Take a look at like the Japanese community. There is so much shit there that you would never see in the Western community because it's like highly specific to like one or two or like a small group of people that are just like, I want this super highly custom and it's gonna look totally whack, but it's gonna work for me. And in that sense, I gotta respect it, right? Sometimes you just gotta do what works for you. This does not seem to appeal to the masses, though. I will say that.
No, I feel like when you think about the Japanese community and all their crazy DIY stuff, they have a very practical mindset when it comes to it. I mean, I agree with it, but everything I've seen that they've done is very practical, even for like small form factor boards. This is not something I would imagine seeing from Japan.
No, I'm certainly not saying this is, in the same sense. I'm just trying to say from a sense of me trying to defend it, because I feel like we should try to be unbiased here. We should try to think of reasons why A, it's bad, and B, maybe it's not bad. And I think, at least in my mind, one of the only reasons I can come up with for it not to be an yikes is maybe it just really works for like that one or two particular people. And it's hard for me personally to hate on that. But no, I don't want to use one of these.
Discriminate says, I feel like a stenographer's keyboard makes more sense than this. You're correct, Discriminate. Well, it really does.
Well, once you learn it, stenography makes way more sense than all keyboards, right? It's just a more efficient means of communication.
I mean, no, because there's no numbers on the stenography keyboard. You have to spell out numbers. There's no Well, I guess there is technically punctuation.
But
yes.
Like, even if you have to type out numbers, it's still like more words per minute than like a standard keyboard, right? Most of the time, like, you probably get the point across faster, which is why it's used in a lot of scenarios in the professional world.
Yeah.
But I think that probably splitting hairs at that point. I don't know if I'd call it a yikes. I don't think it's cool at all. Yikes seems extreme to me, but then again, I feel like I'm approaching this a little bit different than maybe a lot of chat is. To me, yikes in WoW are just like really, really extreme. And there needs to be monumental reasons for one way or the other. With that said, I'm not going to argue against it staying in yikes, but I think there are definitely worse things in this category.
We got the Magic Force 49.
Look at that expos, dude. Like, what is...
I reviewed this.
That's a nightmare. I remember, yeah.
Actually,
the expos is a nightmare, dude. Look, like, just... Like, you look at that, you already don't want to type on it.
What were they thinking?
This is one of those things where, like, you know how people say, like, you eat with your eyes first? This would be like, you consume this with your eyes and, like, you're already puking before your fingers touch it. With that said, I've never used one, but I remember yours a little bit, and it really didn't seem very good, so...
Wow.
This seems like a yikes to me. That seems fair.
Look at how far. Okay, think about where your fingers go in your right hand. Okay, you got your J, your K.
I'd rather not.
Your L,
this just looks.
And your pinky goes on colon, right?
Look at how far apart the keys are.
Look at how much farther the backspace is to the semicolon for your pinky versus how far it actually is on your keyboard. Like,
this doesn't. It doesn't. Looking at it even just feels bad. What is that backspace? Is that like 2U by like 1.75U?
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, yeah.
No, this is bad. This is definitely deep into yikes territory, without a doubt. They tried something. I don't think it worked. Kudos to them for trying something a little different, but I think there are just too many low points for this one. It uses like really bad switches too, right?
Just like no-name clone switches. I don't know.
Oh, okay.
I don't remember. Okay. I actually wanted to give the keyboard a fair shot, so I actually did switch the switches with loop switches. So like, if I complained, it wouldn't be because of the switches; it'd be because of everything else.
Okay. Yeah. Fair enough.
I mean, they do have another backspace in the middle between G and H.
What the actual F, dude? Like, this is...
Not
Yeah,
a not a thumb
no.
backspace. No, mind you, like most.
If anything, this needs to go lower.
Okay, Expos or MD65 650L. If you were legitimately stuck in a situation and for whatever reason you just had to choose one of these two boards, would you go with the wet newspaper, or would you go with the freaking
Ridiculous everything else.
everything ridiculous else? Yeah. Okay, chat. Okay, let me just slash pull this in chat. Okay.
This is totally poll worthy. Yeah.
Best of the worst, which is a great show, by the way. MD650L versus the Expos.
Yeah. See, Agent Hubcap in chat is saying what we're all thinking. Can I just use my laptop keyboard instead?
You can't use your laptop keyboard. You can't use your phone keyboard.
I just want to use my phone over this.
You can't even enable the Microsoft on-screen keyboard with to use it with your mouse. You have to physically put your fingers and type with the MD650L or the Expos.
Yeah, no, that's fair. And what makes this really good is because both options are just really truly that level of bad. As bad as it is, I think I would have to pick the MD just because I wouldn't be able to fucking type on that ludicrous Expos layout, even though the switches would probably be like undeniably better.
Oh, they are undeniably better. I mean, I'd rather tap on a table than type with the MD650.
Wait, I need a little bit more context here. Do I have to use this for the rest of my life, or is this like one kind of like scenario where I have to use one for like an hour?
At least a week. So you have to game with it. You have to type whatever you have to type with it. You have to if you had to legitimately use it for a week, for anything computer related.
I think I'd still have to go with the MD. I think if you would have told me like 5 years or 10 years of my whole life, I would go with the Expos, because then you would have to learn that layout. You'd have to force yourself to learn the layout just so you wouldn't hate yourself for the rest of your life typing on the MD650L. That's the reality.
Tendrunk says, I'd use the MD650L, so when I throw it out, I don't have an adjustment period.
Actually, another total interesting reason why I'd choose the MD is because for gaming, you would just need the left side. I'm all about having mouse space on the right, so that'd be another plus for the MD here.
Yeah, except for the MD, how would you know when you actually released a key?
You wouldn't. You would just die over and over again in whatever game you're playing. But I don't know, man. It's bad. What's the poll looking like here?
86% for the MD650L and 14% for the Expos.
Okay, so at least 6 out of the 6 voters of the MD have never used Cherry ML switches before.
Yeah, I don't think anyone in chat. I'm pretty sure most people in chat have not used.
Has anyone here used Cherry ML switches? Be honest. Be honest in chat. Have you guys used Cherry MLs? Pretty hard these days to find boards that it comes on.
I mean, we're not telling you to try them. No. It's quite the opposite. We don't want you to try them.
Don't try them.
Yeah, don't try them. Please don't. We're not.
Yeah. I want to know who's actually used them, and if you have, how did you feel about them? Because I was not happy with my Cherry ML experience.
We're not even trying to reverse psychology, you guys here. This is
no.
Is it worse than your Chromebook? Yes. I've used a Chromebook. Yeah, it's worse.
It's probably worse than most, if not all, laptops I've typed on.
Yeah.
And I've typed on some pretty bad laptop keyboards. Cherry ML is just bad, says Zerp. Yep. Yeah, it's just true. But I mean, everything else about the keyboard is better than the Expos. So like, what's more important? How truly nightmarish awful the ML switches are, or the fact that the Expos is just bad at everything else except for the switches, which are still not ideal.
Brian, why didn't you sleep the Genji? Couldn't find the shift key in the Expos. Yeah, that would happen.
I wouldn't be able to find any. I wouldn't be able to leave spawn. I wouldn't know.
Well, the shift key on both sides is only one U on the Expos.
Why is the alt like 30 times bigger than every alpha? This seems, I don't know. I don't know, man. It just ate it, Chief. I think I'm with Chad on this one. I think you'd have to go for the ML just because for a week of use, it's just a more pleasant layout, even if it has a way worse Switch.
Yeah, yeah.
But again, like I mentioned earlier, if you're going with a lifetime scenario here, I think I'd have to pick the Expos.
I have one Cherry ML story that doesn't involve me. It's actually a good story, and a story that makes you think, but why? This is the story of why Hata doesn't mod switches. Because the only time he's ever mod switches is he spent 3 hours lubing a board of Cherry ML switches, and he's like, well, this is shit. And then just decided modifying switches is a no-go. And he told me that. I'm thinking like, but they were already bad switches to begin with. You can't. Why would you do that to Cherry?
A lot of people in the hobby in general, I've noticed, are under the impression that if you just lube switches, they'll be way better. But the reality is, like, even with a nice lube and a good, lube application, you can't always save bad switches. Like, it's just not possible, right? Like, I'm kind of a firm believer in the fact that like lube helps like good switches become amazing, but it doesn't help bad switches become great, right? Like, it just makes bad switches slightly more tolerable. Lube is not a cure-all. Never will be. Sometimes switches are just bad. And in the case of the MLs, the worst.
Okay, so in the corner, worst boards is the absolute worst is the Expos, followed by the MD650L.
Yep, as far down as you can get them. Yep, good stuff.
Okay. So, anyone want to challenge the Gherkin or the minivan being in Yikes? Or the Magic Force 49? My argument for the Gherkin is the same as the Alpha 28. It's just a worse plunk. Like, the Gherkin just isn't cool just because just get a plunk.
Is the butter stick on this board anywhere?
I don't think so.
Because the butter stick was just like the way smaller Gherkin.
Yeah.
Like the 2x8 or 2x10 or whatever. Yeah, Gherkin. I mean, it's a fun project, and I will say with boards like this, I think they have some merit, not necessarily as keyboards, but merit as in like a macro pad.
Okay,
right?
okay, that's fair.
Like, I wouldn't want to type on this, but like I would use it for like stream controls or like media controls or this and that, maybe arrow keys and some function keys if I'm using like a 60% elsewhere. I think there is absolutely merit for this kind of product in that sense, or maybe even like an artisan like showcase, perhaps. But as an individual keyboard, I wouldn't want to type on it.
I think you and Chat are right. I think I didn't give the Gherkin enough credit moving over. I think maybe it should be moved possibly out of Yikes, because I can see more uses in terms of it being like a macro pad, maybe even just like a pad for specific games.
It has functionality outside of what most people would automatically think.
Add a small lipo and a Bluetooth controller, and now you got your TV remote.
Yeah, and like you can't necessarily say the same thing about minivan, because minivan's like a highly specific layout for like some people.
Okay, let's put the Gherkin in the Shadow Realm, and it's gonna emerge somewhere in meh.
I'm okay with that. Yeah, it has merit.
Vortex Race, I put it in Yikes because that escape key and that delete key in the top corners.
Those are definitely probably the biggest drawback. I mean, other than that, is the board really so bad? Like, what else is bad about the board other than those two keys?
I mean, it's just not cool.
It's just like a generic.
The board itself.
It's a generic low profile.
Yeah, I mean the board itself is fine and types fine. I mean, it works. It's just not cool.
It's true, but we're not the audience for this board as well. I feel like it's worth pointing out, to Vortex's credit, a lot of like the kind of like gaming members of the community do actually like a keyboard like this. Even if people like us look at this and we're like, that's dumb. It has dumb keys and it's low profile. Why would I use this? And like realistically, we wouldn't. But I think there is merit for this keyboard. I think the keys are a bad choice. The 1.5s in the top right and left respectively. I think it's a bad choice. but is it so bad to merit a truly yikes keyboard? I'm not so sure. I think I defend this a little bit more towards meh.
I don't know. There's like that's kind of like the only defense for it, which is it's not our
Yeah.
our cup of tea. But I mean,
Like I was saying earlier.
This is the cool board for enthusiasts by enthusiasts, and in
Oh,
terms of
okay,
like
well,
enthusiast
that's fine.
coolness, that's why for me it's like in terms of enthusiast coolness.
Okay, yes.
Nah.
In terms of enthusiast coolness, this is radically uncool. That's fair. If we're taking the show into the perspective of like we have to look at it from specifically our points of view as, experienced long-term keyboard enthusiasts, yes, this is seriously an uncool board. Yikes, maybe. I'll defend against it though, even if it doesn't get moved. I think it should be a little closer towards meh. Maybe like borderline meh and yikes.
So borderline meh and yikes would be the Xeno and the Molly.
Okay. Okay. Well, I mean, Xeno had a lot of issues that aren't just like, layout, right? Like the group buy, the Xeno's not a bad board per se, right? It's probably yikes because of the way the group buy went, right? That's why you have it in here, I assume.
Yeah.
Because like let's jump into an alternate reality for just a second. Let's say the Xeno group buy went totally fine. All the units showed up to all the people. The quality control was good. There was no problems with the board. It shipped as intended.
It'd be cool.
Would it be a cool board?
Yeah.
Okay.
It'd be a cool board.
Okay. So, but obviously we have to take into account the
Everything.
way the group buy went, which was bad.
Because so the way one of my reasons is like I always bring back the meetup example. If I saw a Xeno at the meetup, my first thought wouldn't be, oh, that's a cool Xeno. My first thought would be to the owner, you're one of the lucky ones, aren't you?
Yeah.
Which is like basically a major diss about the whole Xeno process, which is
because
kind of uncool.
Yeah, because the keyboard itself, I think it's pretty cool. It's nothing like too groundbreaking, right? It's a pretty generic, like nice custom. Poner did a pretty good job designing it. I mean, it's one of his slightly older designs, I guess, at this point. But I do think he's a talented designer, and I think the board could have been cool, like Huey said. If everything went well, the board would have been in the cool category. But this goes to show you that in this kind of setup, the group buy can have that big of an effect on a product.
Like,
and a lot of people got pretty bad units. So.
Yeah, the board itself is why it's not directly in yikes. Like the board is the best part of it.
I think this is probably fine. If you had a good unit, you didn't have issues. Obviously you'd probably want to move it up towards meh, maybe even bordering on cool. But if you're one of those people that were the unlucky people, maybe you haven't even yours hasn't arrived yet, or maybe it had terrible quality, then yeah, you're probably going to advocate for yikes. So I can definitely see the borderline here.
When every Xeno has shipped, I think it could deserve to move into meh. But until that happens, until I look at someone with a Xeno and I no longer think, oh, you're one of the lucky ones, I think it should stay straddling that yikes meh line.
I think this is fine. I wouldn't argue against this really.
Then
I would agree that if all the boards finish shipping, and like most of them weren't too bad, you could probably advocate for meh. Yeah. Molly, I'm not too familiar with the Molly. Honestly, I've never used or seen or built one. I know they had some issues with the group buy, and I know there's definitely a lot of hate for TKC depending on where you look in the community. So I don't really have too much input on this one, unfortunately. I think the board looks fine. The layout seems fine.
It looks fine. It's funny because we actually had Jason on Top Clack when he talked about it a long time ago.
Yeah, that was definitely some time ago. I'm gonna be honest with you. I don't remember much about this board.
So from Zerp in chat, it had degrading PVD, ano issues, PCB issues where they soldered the PCB ports to the wrong side, like left side into the right side, so you couldn't even use the PCB. And it was so bad in QC Blind Assassin said he would not work with TKC moving forward at all because there's basically no QC at all. They didn't. Once they received the boards from the factory, they literally just straight shipped them. They didn't even look at them. Oh, because you would catch if a USB port was on the wrong side.
Yeah. Okay. Those are pretty enormous issues. So I can definitely see why it is right here. So right now the way this is laid out, the Xeno, I keep forgetting, the Xeno is more yikes than the Molly in this setup, or
No,
is this the same tier?
They're the same tier, and it's so it's basically the same tier as Molly, just slightly cooler because it's above it.
Okay, yeah. Okay. I think that's probably fine. That can stay there. I think. I would move the Vortex Race right under the Molly.
Okay.
And I would. Yeah, I think the Magic Force 49 is pretty awful. Alpha 28 again, maybe some merit as like a macro pad, but that Yikes is probably fine for that too. I would probably straddle the line on that one. Yeah.
Yeah. Hold on. Let's see. What is the?
I mean, let's just compare. Let's compare maybe little apples and oranges here. Let's compare the Molly to the Vortex Race. Vortex Race didn't have any really like production issues, right? Like the keyboard itself came out fine.
No, it's an OEM. It's completely fine.
Yeah, I mean Vortex. I mean, of course, they were behind things like the legendary Poker 2 and stuff like that. I mean, Vortex has a lot of history in our community, and the board did come out fine. Is there a reason? Would you want to use a Molly over a Vortex Race? Is the Molly a cooler keyboard than the Vortex Race?
So some people would argue, if the Molly was idealized as it was supposed to be, then it would be much cooler than it is.
That's a very fair assessment, yeah.
Because I think the idea of the Molly is obviously way cooler than what happened to the Molly.
Yeah,
it's tough.
I'd
right?
almost wanna put the Vortex Race above the Molly.
I mean, because the Vortex Race, if you got a dead unit, you just talk to mk.com, which is who you probably bought it from, and say, hey, there's something wrong. And they're like, oh yeah, ship it back and get you a new one. Because it's done by a normal company who does normal things.
I think you can hate the 1.5 U keycaps, and that's totally valid, but I don't think that alone is reason enough to be a Yikes keyboard. The board is fundamentally fine other than that.
Okay. Thought experiment for you in chat.
Okay.
You have $300. Do you take a chance and hope you get a good Molly, or do you get the Vortex Race and pocket $125?
Oh, that's like you mean like who and where I am right now, or if I were like coming into the community
right now?
God, that's I think I go with the Race. I think I have to buy the Vortex Race. Mainly because I like saving money, and I also like that the keyboard isn't as wide. Keyboard width is really important to me as a gamer. So, yeah, the Molly is not really for me to be. I mean, neither keyboard is for me, but I would ultimately have to go for the Vortex Race, which I think is a better value.
Chat is with you. Everyone in chat is saying they would not make that gamble. They know that gamble they could win, and you could get a decent Molly, but a lot of people are like not going to take that risk.
Yeah, and I think you're right when you said earlier that if things had maybe gone differently, the Molly could have been a much cooler keyboard than it is. But obviously, taking into account the QC issues and such, I don't think you can put it much higher than that. And I do think the Race fundamentally is just it's a lot less of a gamble, right? You save money, you're going to get a working product, and if you have any issues, like they're probably going to be fixed.
Imagine the coolness of a board being decided on whether or not you get a good unit. Is this like we're back in 2015?
Yeah, right. I mean, we're so spoiled now that like almost anytime something shows up, like there's little to no issue.
Nowadays, streamers who build keyboards are complaining that this board could have had more foam packed in. Like, those are the complaints I hear sometimes.
I mean, we should be thankful for that, right? If, like,
Yeah.
if those are the kind of complaints we're having, like, things could be going worse. Things used to be worse in some ways, so I guess we can be okay with that. Glad chat was agreeing with me on that one. I think this is fine. I think they can both straddle the line, but I think the race is fundamentally a better overall product than the Molly, just based on the reasons that we talked about. I think that looks pretty good.
Sorry, Blind Assassin, but your Molly got beat out by the Vortex.
It's not his fault, though,
it's not
right?
his fault.
It's
Yeah,
not his
exactly.
fault.
That's what I'm sorry for him.
The Molly had potential. This could have easily been in the cool category if things had gone differently. It's not really his fault, right?
It's not his fault at all. It's not his fault at all. He just did the design. It basically was like they paid him for the design, and they took over after that.
Yeah, it's just the way it goes sometimes, right? All right, what else we got? What's coming up next?
Well, let's move on to some of these meh ones. I think these are some of the more interesting ones that a lot of people may have a little bit of a gripe about. Yeah. So one that ended up in the meh that I think should have actually could have gone yikes is the Vortex Core, because it's a 40% that's not programmable unless you get a custom PCB by someone else that isn't even like in stock right now.
You're advocating for this going into yikes?
Yes.
Okay.
Or at least straddling the line like the race. I think it's too limited because at a 40%,
yeah,
the freedom of a 40% is that full programmability and that full I want to do what I want to do in the limited amount of space I have. And Vortex Core basically forces you to know you have a limited amount of space and you're going to use it how we want you to use it.
I think you're absolutely right, and I think based on that, it has to go either on the same tier as the Vortex race or below the Vortex race. Meaning because it doesn't have the functionality that the Vortex race provides because of that programmability issue for the stock PCB. But other than that, like fundamentally, the keyboard is like fine, right?
Yeah.
Like there's nothing detrimental to this keyboard other than the potential programmability issues that you're gonna have.
It has the standard decent Vortex build quality.
Yeah. I would say this can definitely go lower, but I think the lowest you could put this is like right under the race. It could be ever so slightly worse than the race. But
I'm gonna put it in the one tier lower than the race Xeno. I don't think it straddles the line. I think it's solidly in yikes because it steals basically the essence of a 40%.
That's fair. That's fair.
And that's uncool because that defeats. Okay, now that we're back at yikes, back at meh, the Gherkin, which is in the Shadow Realm, we were like, hey, maybe we should be moved up. Maybe
this is at least a meh board for some reasons, even if it's not standard everyday typing. There's use for this. There's functionality for this. And like you could use this as a remote. You genuinely could. And like that's kind of cool in a way, right?
Yeah.
Okay, let's take a look at some of it. You have the 6.7 V2 Mark II in here?
Yeah.
And meh? What? Okay.
I don't think it's special. It's just it's not yikes. It's just you look at a KVD67 V2 Mark II and like okay, it's a fine board, man. Okay,
so I think my question to you is in the overall scheme of this entire board, is meh more like average or is meh below average?
Meh is in terms of so it can vary because for example the board itself is average. Like there's nothing actually as you know there's nothing wrong with this.
There's nothing wrong with the board, yeah.
Right? But nothing about this board to me and to at least most people in chat when we went through this episode moves the heart. Because this is the cool board and it's a fine board, yeah, and it's just because it's a cool and it works just fine doesn't mean it's necessarily cool. Like you're gonna see dozens of these at a meetup and none of them are special, but they all work fine, they all type fine, but they're not particularly special that I know of.
Okay.
Which is interesting because on top of it, contrasting it, I have the Canoe Gen 2.
The Canoe was a kind of a revolutionary board.
Gen 1.
Gen 1 was yeah. Gen 2 Gen 2 was taken a little bit more mixed, you're right. I think the canoe's probably fine there. A lot of this actually looks okay. Uh, I would the Plonk. I would absolutely argue the Plonk is cooler than like mid meh personally, just because of the influence it's had on the hobby.
Yeah,
Um,
that's definitely fair. So in the old cool board, it was actually very low cool originally, and for this
I
new season,
yeah.
people said no, it should be meh. The status of it doesn't live up anymore. I don't know. I didn't necessarily agree, but chat felt very strongly about that.
You could argue the Plonk had more influence in the community at large than the TGR Alice.
I mean, it made the 40% niche exist. Without the Plonk, there would not be a 40% niche.
Yeah, and I mean,
It wasn't okay. So it wasn't the first 40%. Everyone, don't get me wrong. It was not the first 40% by any stretch, but it exploded the popularity of 40%.
a lot of boards came out because of the Plonk. The Plonk inspired way more boards than the TGR Alice has. Obviously, the Plonk's been around a lot longer. You know, the community looked a little different back then, but the Plonk is undeniably at least low cool, I would say. I think you probably had it placed right before, strictly speaking from like an influence perspective, which to me I often value more highly than like the other variables that we've been discussing.
Yeah, yeah.
My opinion, obviously.
I'm gonna shadow zone it, and yeah, we're gonna move it to the cool at some point.
I think it's undeniably cool personally. Even if I don't want to type on it because I don't use that layout. Like that's not really for me, but I do understand the absolutely, enormous impact it's had on the community.
Okay, there's a board I want to talk about.
Uh-oh.
The cyberboard.
The cyberboard. Okay.
Exactly middle of the meh.
Middle of the Have you used one of these yet?
Nope.
I haven't either. I don't like the way it looks. I think it's kind of neat in the sense of like it's fun, but I think aesthetically it just doesn't look good. I think it's gimmicky, right? And I think there's merit in that, especially for some people. I would never pay for one of these.
So on the episode, I memed on it pretty hard because I'm like, because the way I think of it, okay, think about it. Most every board on the cool board, you could take to a coffee shop back pre-COVID or post-COVID, and not look like a total douchebag. If you took a cyberboard to a coffee shop, you plonked your laptop down, you plonked your cyberboard down either on top or right in front of it, people would be looking at you.
Yeah,
and
it would certainly turn heads for better or worse. I would never. I could never imagine taking one of these to a coffee shop. I like that metric of deciding on a board's coolness though. That's like actually kind of like a surprisingly good like way to look at it. It's like how would the general public look at this aesthetically?
And like how would you look at this board, because the display is on a slant facing away from you.
Yeah.
Which means it's the visual equivalent of someone blasting music from their phone on public transportation.
The person sitting across from you watching you type gets the biggest benefit of this keyboard.
Yeah. You're not going to benefit from it unless you have a small mirror in front of your keyboard so you can see your own thing that you then have to program mirrored so you could see it properly.
Yeah. I think I'll give them this, all right? I think it pulls off the gimmick that they're going for quite well. Aside from that, the board is really not that cool or interesting. I think it's totally fine. Smack dab in the middle of meh. I think it should stay there. That's totally reasonable. There's nothing like glaringly awful about it. It probably functions totally fine. It probably feels mediocre. Probably sounds mediocre. The screen's cool, but it's a gimmick. It's fine where it is.
Okay. With what I said in mind, the reason I just wanted to cover the cool board is because I want to read this one YouTube comment I got on the episode where I cover it. Okay.
This is not going to be good. All right.
At 31 minutes, Okay, bro, you had my respect and then immediately lost it all. Anyone who shit talks the cyberboard are just people who couldn't get one. I don't think anyone would take their expensive custom keyboard to Starbucks to type on. Also, the reactions you claim are yours alone since you already have a bias toward it. I had my cyberboard on a couple of my Zoom meetings and I always got amazed reactions. Everyone immediately asked me what it was and started conversations about keyboards. Like, seriously, how often do you see something like this? A lot of keyboards, especially TKLs, all look boring and mundane. You can't even differentiate the keyboards unless you flip them upside down and see the weight on the engraving to see whose TKL it is. Also, you make an ass of yourself because you've never typed on one. You can indeed see the effects by yourself without tilting the board using a mirror, you ass. This is something you can't do with your 7V, right? You have to flip the board upside down to see the distinguishing feature, which is its weight. But sure, that sounds more reasonable than a display that is tilted forward from you.
I mean, I would much rather own and use a 7V than this. I'll be honest. He's a little extreme of a commenter, I would say.
I agree with Osiris.
I think the board's okay, right? Like, it has a gimmick. It pulls off the gimmick, at least to some degree. End of story. I don't think it's really that cool, though.
No, I don't think
fancy lighting and stuff like that. It's not totally new. It's not, like, totally interesting. It's kind of fun, sure, and yeah, again, it's probably eye-catching if you're, in a, like you said, he's in a Zoom meeting or whatever. Like, sure, like that's fine. Like, some people are gonna take notice, some people are probably gonna like it. It's eye-catching in the way a lot of like wacky cars might be eye-catching, but like, does that make it cool? And obviously, this is, a very opinionated kind of show, and there's not really any getting around that. So,
yeah.
If you have a problem with that, then, like, why leave comments like that in the first place?
It's as if, like, they like, were okay with everything I've said harshly about every other keyboard until I got to the cyberboard.
Maybe they just really like the cyberboard. I don't know. But, I mean, at the end of the day, this is your show, and people watch often, for the most part at least, people are probably watching for your opinions. And you'd be remiss to not give your accurate thoughts and opinions on something, honestly, and it'd be bad if you didn't, right? So for better or worse, you have it in meh, right? Like, it's not like this is a yikes product.
It's not a yikes board. It's straight mid meh, the most mid of meh you can get.
Yeah, like this is like pretty mediocre, right?
Yeah. In terms of coolness, extremely mediocre, because I know some people probably would think it's cool as hell, and other people, like Sake, would say it is garish as hell.
Yeah,
right?
I don't like it.
It pulls both extremes for a lot of people, and because of that, I think it's just fine being... It's a meh board, and for me, it's also just meh at best. I think it's more obnoxious than cool, just because, yeah, that's just how I feel.
Cyrus says, if you could mod the screen to play Tetris at work, then it's immediately WoW.
He has a point.
I mean... No, this is fine. I don't think you can really move this up or down, personally. There's nothing WoW about it.
Yeah.
We mentioned earlier, this is from an enthusiast perspective, right? So, like, as an enthusiast of many years, there's nothing wowing about this. We've been through all the light shows before. It's not that interesting. And aside from that, like, one particular gimmick, which it does seem to do fairly well, it's just not that interesting, right? Like, the board is kind of awkwardly shapen. I'm not a big fan of that. Aesthetically, it's just huge to accommodate that screen. Not a fan of that. The layout seems fine. I don't really have too many bad things to say about it, but I don't really have anything great to say about it either. And because of that, I feel like it's totally fine right here.
Hence, extremely middle meh. You don't have anything good, you don't have anything bad. It exists.
It exists. Yep. Let's move right along past this.
So another big controversial one, GMMK Pro. When it was announced, people were like,
I have one behind me. I actually own one of these now.
So do I. It's somewhere on my shelf somewhere. But when it debuted, everyone thought this would be the coolest shit. This is gonna revolutionize custom. Screw getting a $400 custom. This is $200, baby. Slaps the hood.
People actually think that?
Yeah, there's a lot of people in RMK who thought this would like revolutionize. Like, why wait for group buys when
Okay.
you're gonna get an in-stock keyboard that's as good as all those customs TGRs, GMMK Pro, bruh. And then it came out.
Okay, that's fair. So again, I want to approach this with completely unbiased everything because that's what I'm always trying to do. Obviously, there's some previous drama around GMK or not GMK, but Glorious. What's their actual name? Is it Glorious Gaming Race? Is that what they call themselves?
Yeah,
So obviously, Glorious. Not everyone is completely thrilled with them. I think that's totally fine and valid. Personally, I don't really care. I don't really have any hard feelings about them. I think they're a business, they're a company, and they're doing business and company things, and that's kind of to be expected. I've talked with several of their members in video calls, and they seem fine to me. Whatever. They sent me one of these. I checked it out. It doesn't blow me away. I think it's totally fine for the price. I think it's actually probably pretty good for $170. I think it was. You get the knob with it. You get a case. You get some other stuff. It's got hot swap. It has RGB. It honestly doesn't look that bad. Like, it's not like it's aesthetically bad. I think it looks fine. I don't really have anything like bad to say about it, right? I think if you take the time to like lube the stabilizers and you put in switches you like and you put on caps you like, I think the board is fine. This is probably where it deserves to be. I would say it's high meh. There's some minor issues with the V1s that they're aware of, and I hope they kind of fix for the V2. Primarily, a lot of the way the gasket mounting works, which I think does need to be changed a little bit. If the V2 fixes that, they update some things, I think the board has potential. I think it could be much higher meh, or even maybe starting to border on cool. But right now, I think it's probably totally fine where it is, kind of middle of the road, maybe slightly above higher middle meh.
I think I remember what kind of held it back from being a higher meh is it was kind of like miscommunicated its actual VIA compatibility,
Yes.
which isn't basically. And the
Yeah.
newest batch that has been shipping, they did say, "Hey, we're switching microcontrollers, so it may not even be fully QMK compatible." Which, as an enthusiast,
That's an issue. I mean,
whoa! You're telling me I was supposed to get a board that you advertised as fully QMK compatible out of the box, and now you're telling me that because you can't get a certain part, it's just not going to be. That's very problematic in my opinion.
yeah, I completely agree there. I mean, especially again from an enthusiast perspective, QMK is the baseline, right? That's the bare minimum it needs to have to like be a decent keyboard in this community right now. I feel like as an enthusiast, and VIA is kind of like icing on the cake, right? VIA is like almost still like a selling point to some people, at least for me. Like, yeah, like I don't want to mess around with other. Like, let me just pick and choose what I want my keys to do. Right? Programming on my keyboard is not my fun part of the experience, right? Building and using it is. So like I completely agree with you there. Being advertised as QMK VIA compatible and then like kind of shitting the bed on that definitely loses marks for there, and I think it's totally fine in the meh category where it is right now.
Okay. Any meh boards that you wanna raise fists on?
HB85, I will throw hands.
Okay,
over
okay.
HB85.
It's the highest meh. It's the coolest thing in the meh category.
This board is undeniably cool. I think it's a sin to have this in the meh category. This board is very, very cool.
Please elaborate.
Okay, for starters, I will say that, and this is probably going to be unbelievable for some people. This is without a doubt one of the best keyboards I've ever typed on. And literally, there's like nothing special about it internally, right? There's an inlay. It's top mount. The top mount actually mounts to the inlay, which is kind of interesting. And I don't know why. I just had some Milky Gaterons that I tub lubed, like not even very amazing switches, and I put them in there, and it was legit one of the best typing experiences I've ever had. And for that reason alone, I want to give it a lot of merit. But I also just love the way it looks. I love the options. There was a lot of really interesting and like kind of defining layouts. The LED notifications in the top right, I freaking love those, the indicators rather. And it had the RGB bar with the logo on the top left, where it would kind of swing back and forth RGB if you wanted it to. I thought that shit was rad. I don't think the keyboard's perfect. I definitely think it has some flaws, but overall, I think this was a much cooler keyboard than just meh. And plus, it's based on something from keyboard history too, the hit bit.
Yeah.
So I thought this was super cool personally. If I were running the show, this would solidly be cool. And you know what? I don't care what chat would say. But there's my opinion, guys.
Well, what is chat thing? Has chat been convinced to move it, other than Mr. Petrov, who I think was in the original episode as well, trying to advocate for it?
I actually did wind up selling this board a while back, and this is probably one of like the 2 or 3 boards I regret selling the most, up there with my HHKB Pro 1.
That's a big one.
Getting rid of this was an absolute mistake. And to me, that's kind of a mark of a nice board, right? When you regret getting rid of it. And I'm sure, and I've been through it a few times with multiple boards, and I'm sure you might have as well. And I'm sure some people in chat maybe even. But there's sometimes you just get rid of a board, in the heat of a moment, and then big pog regret. In fact, it's the one that got away, and for me, this is one of them.
This is sad Pepe.
If you have one to sell me, let me know.
See, for me, I honestly would have rather had a modern iteration where they made it slightly bigger to have an actual proper numpad.
That's fair.
That's what, for me, that was like, because I understand, calling back to the Hitbit, which was, an amazing choice by them. I just wish they would just decide that bit of modernization to make the numpad properly a numpad. Because if it's just,
that's reasonable. From my eyes,
11
I'm not a numpad user, so I just don't even care about it. I never use the numpad anyways. But they had other layouts, right? Did they not have one with a different numpad?
No, it was always within that space. But there was none where I think you had proper like numpadness. I'm pretty sure.
That's
because of the
fair.
space constraints. That's just, you only have 3U with that direction, so you can't have a proper numpad because you don't have the punctuations, or the mathematical operations, which is unfortunate. But there's a lot of bits of the board that I did like a lot, and that's why I put it in the absolute highest of meh. But I think it was just...
Well, you asked if I wanted to throw hands, and you know what? I will, for the HB85, I will throw hands. I will absolutely throw hands. This is probably one of the few boards that you actually have on the overall wall. I absolutely advocate for like complete moving to a different section.
I know,
because otherwise, I think you usually end up with like a relatively pretty accurate board for the most part. But this one to me changed the way I keyboards.
I think for my chat when we did it, a big thing was what Streak and Bison just pointed out, which is that the F-row being like offset like that. I know that threw quite a few people off. With your escape being above 1 and 2 as opposed to like
it's a little different. I'll give you that. It's not everyone's ideal layout. Maybe I'm a little bit more adaptable than some people. It didn't really bother me. I didn't have this particular layout. I think I had a different one that was which one did I have? I had the one with arrow keys but with the blocker. So I had the A.STT version. Which was my favorite layout of the 3. And I don't know. I thought that was totally fine for me. But obviously, I don't. My work doesn't require keyboards, and I know a lot of people need like specific things. They need this and that to be familiar. I can totally see why these layouts would not work for people. But from my perspective, my personal perspective as an enthusiast, this was a freaking cool board. And it was not only one of the ones that got away, but it really kind of altered my perspective of what keyboards could be like. And to me, that's undeniably cool.
That's a pretty fair reason. I have no qualms against that. That's. I trust your opinion pretty well on keyboard feels. And you say it feels good. It probably felt pretty good.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Huey. Yeah, I was kind of trying to go over the board earlier the other day as well on on a VOD, and I was. This is probably one of the only things I would really drastically think needs to be moved personally. I might meme about the equals mountain. I think the equals mountain is cooler, but I think it's probably it's fine in the mech category. Let's be real. Even though I think it's cooler, but the HB85, that board is just too cool to be in meh. I'm sorry, and I don't care what chat says. Mr. Petrov says HB85 high cool.
He also said that
Very
the
nice.
layout is yikes.
The layout is not yikes. All right, just be a better human. Be more adaptable. I don't know. I'm just kidding. Geo says agree on high cool.
Okay, if you think
Numpad mashed to the side looks good to you. I think it looks fine. I'm not as picky as some people.
If you think HB85 should be in cool, what in cool should move down to meh to have true balance?
Like a swapperoo.
A swap.
Oh man, that's tough. I feel like I agree with a lot of your cool column. God, what could be meh? The prime. I'll be honest. The prime E. I have used a prime E, and I felt like it was only okay. I don't think it's a terribly cool board. Personally, I think it's fine.
I actually do not remember why I have it here.
I think the board is fine. In full disclosure, I am not a 40s user, but I did get sent one of these by the creator, if I'm not mistaken, years ago. And I put it together on stream, and it was fine. There was nothing wrong with the board, but to me, it's not solidly cool. It's kind of just all right.
Tentrong says the NK65 should be the swap to meh.
What? NK65 is cool.
Geo says the Kinesis Advantage.
What? Kinesis? I think the Kinesis Advantage can straddle meh and cool, but I don't think it could ever go into meh.
I think Kinesis Advantage is, maybe it's because of us. I think it's probably closer to be classified as like boomer cool, because we know why it's cool.
That's fair.
But why we think it's cool, not necessarily be the coolest.
That's true. I mean, nobody coming into the community right now sees the Kinesis Advantage and is like, "Holy shit, nice!" Right? Like, it's like, what the f is that?
I'm pretty sure, like, if I brought a Kinesis Advantage to a meetup, people would be like, "Do you have a disability?" People will legit wonder if you had a disability if you brought one in. They're like, "I've never seen that. Is that kind of a special aid kind of keyboard for your issues?"
Oh, can you do like one more slow scroll through of the, since I'm watching the replay on stream, obviously, can I just get one more good look at that column of cool? What else we got in here? Zephyr's pretty cool. TMO's pretty cool. NK65 is undeniably cool. I don't really care what anyone else thinks. Austin, cool. Mutron, come on, obviously. Ogre, very cool. Key Colt, hard to argue with that. I think the Prime E is the only board I see in here that I feel like. Oh, Southpaw full size? Okay, no, that can get bumped down a bit, I think.
See, for me, between all of those, I would actually choose the Atreus.
I was thinking that as well. I think that's up there for me. I think the Atreus is pretty cool personally, but I don't know if it's solidly in cool. I think it might be a borderline.
Yeah.
I think the Prime E can be brought down a bit too. I don't think the Prime E is.
Well, let's straddle the line with the Prime E, and we'll at the moment do a little swap through with the HB85.
Yeah, HB85 solidly cool.
But where on the cool?
I mean, for me, it's kind of up there, honestly. I mean, maybe it's not a key cult. Maybe it's not the ogre. But I think that's probably a pretty fine place for it. I mean, it's right under the Zephyr, which I think is a pretty cool board, but maybe not as cool as the HB85.
So yeah, remember it goes by columns first, so it's in the least cool of the
least cool column.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the Zephyr is cooler on here, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Man, imagine if the Xeno came out to Zephyr quality. Like, the Xeno would be up there.
Yeah. I think the Zephyr, I think I think the 5 millimeter plate trend kind of came and died like really quickly for a
Oh,
reason.
super quick, yeah.
And if I'm being honest, the 5 millimeter brass plate was the worst offender of them all, and that's obviously what the Zephyr kind of shipped with. Um, I think the Zephyr was an awesomely cool board. I think it looked great. It had a lot of really cool features, and I think the price even was actually relatively reasonable, all things considered, for what it had at the time.
Five something.
It was one of the more expensive keyboards of its time. I'll give you that, but it also had, it was, I think it was a Wilbur design, if I'm not mistaken. You had that great Wilbur PCB. It had, had per key RGB, which at the time was kind of a cooler thing. The weight was like extreme. It had a great weight system. The bottom looked fantastic. I loved the kind of industrial look of the
Yeah.
screws. It was really, really clean.
Oh yeah.
And the quality was honestly pretty high.
It was very high.
The only drawback was the fact that you didn't really have a choice. It was you 5 millimeter brass plate or GTFO, and the typing experience was a little lackluster because of that. But other than that, really nice board. The HB85 impacted me as a keyboard enthusiast more than the Zephyr, so I would have it above personally. But then again, I'd probably have it above the Kinesis Advantage. So I mean, don't let me get too out of control here, I guess.
Let's do this. There we go.
I'm okay with that. I feel better about that. I'm gonna be honest with you. Getting the HB85 out of meh was like my one goal for the stream today. As long as that happened, I feel like I accomplished what I needed to accomplish, and like almost anything else can change, and I don't really care as much. Let's see. I think the rest of this is pretty cool. Keyboardio, solidly cool. I'm not so sure about that.
Really? Why?
I think the Keyboardio is definitely cool, but I think maybe it's a little too high in the cool category.
Even the full wood hardware?
I think the project itself is more cool than the actual board.
But does that kind of make it cool?
It does. I think it's definitely cool. I just don't think it's as cool as you have it personally. I think having it in cool is fine, but for me it's low cool, not more middling. Let's see what else we got in here. The Satisfaction 75. That's pretty cool. Now we recently have the Thermal and Bauer and Juby in here. Southpaw full size. I'd argue that one should be a little lower. I was pretty unhappy with my Southpaw, if I'm being honest. I know I had one of the more like budget friendly configurations. I tried to get like the cheapest version, and the price was pretty reasonable. And I think the board itself was okay. I think the PCB, could have been a little bit more modern. I think I think I had the acrylic plate option, which was obviously the cheapest of it, and it was just not a good typing experience on that size of board. I'll be honest.
That doesn't sound good.
And realistically, the group buy was kind of a disaster.
Yeah.
It really was. It took me a year and a half, probably closer to 2 years to get my board.
Yeah.
I mean, it was not a good look. I don't think it's a terrible board. I think there are way worse boards out there, but I don't think it's a solidly cool board. I think it's probably either borderline meh or closer to meh.
Okay, how about this? What I'm about to do? Ready? This
okay.
To here, this to here, this to here.
Oh, I like this. Okay, I like these changes. I'm happy about all of those.
I think this is a good route to proceed with it.
Yeah, I don't think the Southpaw full size is inherently bad, but I think due to the fact that how poorly the group buy went, and just my experience with building and using it, it was very subpar, and I was just kind of disappointed with my purchase, and that's never a good look, especially after you wait 2 years for a product, right?
A board I want to try to see if it should go higher or lower is the Moonlander. Conceptually, as a split board, I love a ton of things about this board.
Yeah, no, this is a really interesting board, and I think this is
articulating thumb cluster.
Yeah, no, this to me this is undeniably cool. I think you could argue a lot of, maybe not a lot of, but you could argue some flaws, right? As an enthusiast, you don't really want low profile boards, right? They
Yeah.
just sound worse. And obviously it's kind of like this split ergonomic affair, which, is not everyone's cup of tea, but I think within its own category, this is really, really cool.
Yeah. It's a board I think I might try to get this year just because I want to give it a shot. I think it has potential.
Gio says Brian fix Tengu. Where's Tengu? Isn't Tengu in the cool category?
Yeah, it's the lowest. He thinks it should be cooler. I think the Tengu's overrated, to be perfectly honest.
I mean, so I have a Tengu. I don't. I think it's a solidly cool board, definitely. I think it's probably fine where it is. As long as it's in cool, I think it's fine. Because, I mean, it's not stupidly interesting, right? Like, it's not not groundbreaking. You get a pretty standard gasket mount affair. It had some decent options. It was pretty low on the color options, but sometimes that's okay. I think the design is nice. I think it's fine where it is. Maybe a little cooler, sure, but I wouldn't argue against this. I think it's fine. It's a cool board and it's in the cool section.
Geo just doesn't like that it's under Kinesis.
The Kinesis, I mean, I would rather use a Tengu than a Kinesis, but the Advantage 2 is pretty cool, man. Pretty cool.
It's a pretty cool board.
Yeah, I mean, anywhere around there, I think it's probably fine.
How many boards can you say have finger wells?
Yeah, the Kinesis is a good example of a board I don't want to use, but I think is very cool.
Okay, what else?
I don't know. I feel like this category is actually pretty good. You got Ogre.
It's pretty solid.
You got Ogre pretty high up there. Ogre's a nice board. You got some of the Key Cult stuff up there. Blackbird. I'm not fully sold on the Duck Blackbird. I think that maybe could go lower in the cool category, but I think it's also probably fine where it is. This looks E8.5 up there, huh? Okay.
Yeah, people like their E8.5s. I built one. I thought it was okay. I didn't think it was that special, to be honest. But I built two actually. I never thought they were that special, but a lot of people like them. They sold very well. I don't think there's really many or any issues.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a fine board, and exclusive does pretty good stuff. I mean, I got no qualms with it. I've never built one or used one, so I don't know. But I mean, it seemed like maybe a board that wouldn't necessarily be like upper cool. I mean, you have it above the Singa, you have it above the Thermal, you have it just below the Key Cult number 165, clearly instant legend board in the hobby.
Yeah.
Is the E8.5 really up there, just trailing the number 165?
According to Nebula,
I'm not so sure. I don't have an E8.5, so I don't know. But to me, it seems like that's pretty high praise for that board.
As someone who's built two, I also think it is a bit ranked a bit too high. Let's swap it with something cool and unique.
The Thermal seems cooler to me personally, but
yeah, same.
I mean, even no, that seems pretty good. Look, just for Nebula, E8.5 took a quick detour into WoW for just a split second. That's got to make Nebula happy, right? It's a little brief excursion into WoW. Yeah, interesting. So we still have the 7V in WoW, the lowest WoW.
Which I think is fine. I think it's like if you're gonna have a lowest WoW, a board that makes people consider a layout they would never otherwise consider.
Yep.
Is that's the one?
I think that is very, very reasonable rationale. Yeah. Is the E8.5 really cooler than the Real Force 104 UG?
First, I mean, Brian, we're Topra fans. Of course, we don't.
Are we too biased?
Of course, we're definitely going to be too biased in this respect.
How is? Wait, what was above the Jur Mini?
The Blackbird.
How is the Blackbird cooler than the Jur Mini? I disagree with that.
I think people on that episode were hyped of the Blackbird because it's the closest thing to Heine's Ibis.
Okay.
and people are like, well, the Ibis wouldn't exist without the Blackbird. And for some people, it is one of Duck's coolest boards. I think his TCV3 is actually his coolest board.
TCV3 is the coolest board. I think the Orion is probably the best Duck board historically.
Yeah.
Blackbird, I don't know. Blackbird is interesting, and I know it's a fine board because I've used them before, but like, it just doesn't do it for me. I don't think it's cooler than some of the things that are kind of more directly under it personally.
I'll say Blackbird is definitely a board I regret not joining in on.
I think it's cool, but is it too high on the cool scale right now?
How about we just swap it with another Duck board like the Octagon?
Octagon has quite a legacy in the keyboard hobby.
Exactly.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Cool with that. Yeah, this is way more fun than I was expecting. I was like, we'll just move some things around or whatever. But like, this is really cool because now I'm thinking a lot about a lot of boards and products in general that I haven't really thought of in a while. So this is kind of refreshing.
One thing that was really interesting is that the VEA has aged so poorly. It's just like high meh at best. People don't care.
At best, is right. I mean, it was
so revolutionary when it came.
It was
when it
cool
came
for
out,
the time.
People were jizzing everywhere when it came out.
I feel like it just became like outdated like really quickly.
It became outdated before it shipped.
Yeah. It's a really cool concept and a great idea. I just think the execution could have been a lot better.
Yeah.
I think it's fine in the meh category though. High meh, but it's fine in there. Amuic is asking, is Tengu cooler than Satisfaction 75? I think the Tengu is cooler, but I think as a community, the Satisfaction has had more impact by far than the Tengu.
But there are more people who are Tengu fans than Satisfaction 75 fans in chats.
I don't know. I mean, I like my Tengu, and I'm not upset that I purchased it, which is a good sign. I think it's a solidly cool board, but I think impact on the community is more important than how I feel personally about a product for a lot of this. So I think Satisfaction 75 is arguably cooler than the Tengu just because it was board of the year, right? It was voted board of the year for was it 2020 or something, 2019, 2020, I can't remember. But for the March Madness, it was March Madness board of the year.
Yeah, it was at one point.
It community voted. So I mean, it's had a big enough effect on the community, and it spawned so many like similar kind of boards. Plus the weight design's really cool. I think the Satisfaction 75 is undeniably cool, and it's probably cooler than the Tengu in the sense that it's impacted the community like more heavily, more positively. The Tengu is awesome in my opinion, but it's kind of just like another Alice. It's another nice Alice alternative, right? There's nothing terribly interesting about the Tengu other than the fact that like it looks pretty and it has like a modern mounting style.
Yeah.
Other than that, it's kind of just like it's another Alice alternative. And I say that owning and enjoying mine. Satisfaction 75, cooler than the Tengu, I would say.
Yeah, let's piss off chat and move them.
All right. Well, I mean, pissing off chat's kind of like the whole point of this show, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, maybe you caught on quickly.
Wrong idea, but but I kind of understand how this goes. Having opinions on a keyboard discussion stream, it's risk territory, as both of us know.
Why is the Pain 27 so high? Because it's literally one of the best memes this keyboard hobby has ever produced.
It's a good meme. It's absolutely a quality meme.
That's why the Pain 27 is so high on Met. It is, in terms of keyboard memeage, mwah. Like, I like the Pain 27 more than the milk carton one in terms of like keyboard memes.
Oh yeah, no. Yeah, I mean the Pain 27 was like really trendy for a while because it was a meme, and it's not very often. I mean, obviously we've had several, but it's not super often you get like a physical keyboard meme.
Gawk, was the Contra a good meme when it was called the Dank? It was.
I mean, oh man, that is. I mean, that board is really interesting too when you think about it.
Yeah.
It kind of sucks that they couldn't use, or they at least chose not to go with the original name. I can sort of I can see why, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, the cool thing about that is like it's literally a meme in the sense that it has memes printed right there on the PCB.
I mean, they chose to because they were asked to change the name.
Yeah,
I remember talking to people
I
about
mean,
that.
I get it. Yeah, the
And
Contra. I still think the Contra is kind of cool though.
I mean,
You literally immortalize memes on a PCB for the Contra, like community memes.
you
Like
also
to
had
me,
to
that's kind of
solder
cool.
your own microcontroller.
I mean, yeah, but like more DIY isn't necessarily less cool.
That's true. That's true.
In fact, I think a lot of people, a lot of the more DIY centric people in the hobby would probably argue that more DIY is often core. Look at things like the gingham and the plaid. How popular are those? And you have to do way more soldering on those
Yeah,
because you have to solder all the diodes.
but you don't have to solder the microcontroller. You don't have to solder the part that you're gonna actually people will actually fuck up on.
Some people really like that kind of tedious work.
People. People. It's like tedious work you can shut your brain off to. That's why people like soldering those diodes. Because like I'm just gonna put on some true crime podcast and
Look
sip
at
some
this.
wine and go bzz, 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 bzz.
Look at this. Tempest in chat says, sounds difficult. I want to do it. Sake says, SMD soldering is big brain. Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, there was a point in the community where like your kind of like status in the community was like how good of a DIYer you were. And like
Yeah.
it was thought of as cooler shit. Like, what was epic? When people hand wired boards. That was like crazy, right? Nowadays
Sake,
everything's PCB. So like you
did
don't.
you at the New York meetup I went to? There's this guy. He has an amazing board. He did hard tube hand wired, 60%. So instead of like like
Wow.
flexible wire, it's like he actually used like gauged wire that like you would actually have to put force in to actually bend it. So everything was like perfect straight lines for his hand wire. It was
I bet
beautiful.
that looked. I bet that looked really dope,
And
actually. Yeah.
he clipped all the diodes as tiny as possible, so you didn't see those. So basically it's like copper tubes with the tiny diodes in between them, so it'd be perfectly seamless, super straight, clean lines, clean 90 degrees. He wasn't lazy. He properly bent every pipe for 90 degrees and straight. It was beautiful. It was one of the most beautiful. It was the transparent keyboard project, Gawk. Yeah.
Yeah. I totally believe it too, and like. I think when you build a keyboard, right, it's like more personal to you, right? You build it, you tailor it to kind of like your specs, and like you get a sense of satisfaction, a sense of like self-worth that you finish the project, it's yours, and like it's a more personal feeling than just like buying a keyboard and using it, right? Like you might just feel better or differently, more positively even about the keyboard if you yourself put in like the kind of blood, sweat, and tears of it,
Here,
as it
I'll
were.
post a picture of it in. Why is my chat not working? Did my chat freeze? Oh, there we go.
Nope. All right, we're good.
So his solder joints are messy. That was the big issue it had. But like, if you think of a whole board where it's just that piping instead of like flexible wire, it
No,
looked
that's like
beautiful.
that's actually sick.
It looks
That's
so amazing when you saw the whole
That's
board.
so cool. Yeah. And like that was a thing, right? I mean, we had all these people. Like, shout out to a lot of like the old school hand wires. Remember Alex at Pank used the hand wire, but Woot Patoot.
Yep.
Remember Max? I mean, like all these people. Like there used to be like hand wiring like artists.
Yeah, like this. I
Like
saw this at the New York meetup. It was it was art. It was actually, this board was a piece of art.
Yeah, and I think there's absolutely something to be said for that. Like when you put that much attention to detail, it's like building a computer, right? Like you want nice custom cables, and maybe you want them like combed or whatever, and you want to focus on, like, you spend extra time to do all like the cable management and the routing and stuff and this and that. And you want to make sure everything's like clean. I mean, keyboards are the same, right? Like you can put as much passion as you want into it, and I think hand wiring in particular and those kind of like higher level DIY keyboard projects there's something to be said about that having like a factor of coolness.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I hope someone else takes upon and does this on their own because it's a cool project. I posted another picture with a kind of a better view of seeing the whole underside of the board. Um,
Oh
yeah,
yeah,
it's great. Yeah, it's
that's
part of
cool.
the invisible keyboard that was on Geekak a while ago. Yeah, it's just a cool project because for a lot of those wires, they have to like solder those little pipes together basically because some of them you have to like join them together at certain points. So it's great.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, no, he ended up killing the case because he accidentally like hot glued into one of the switches and just couldn't open once he siliconed the case.
Oh,
Yeah,
I mean, that's kind of how it went though, right? It was high risk, high reward. We're so spoiled now. Every freaking keyboard has a PCB for it.
yeah,
You know, it's sometimes several that you can use, and that I mean, they used to be a struggle. Not everything used to have PCBs, right?
yeah,
It was like a big deal when like the GH60 launched, right? Like people could actually have like a custom PCB in their keyboard. Like, are you nuts? But yeah, hand wiring, not really a thing these days, but it used to be pivotal in the keyboard community, and a lot of the hand wirers were, you know, very very artsy and very confident in their skills, and I think that was cool. I
I think
never felt like putting in the effort to hand wire. I did it
yeah,
like
same.
once. I did it like once, and like it didn't come out like it worked, but like it didn't come out super well. And I was just like, okay, I'm never doing that again. But like because I went through that, I had more respect for the people that were doing it, and that's a big deal.
Definitely. Okay,
All
anything
right.
else on the cool board that we want to change today?
Um, I think we did some pretty good work. Maybe take one more pass of this meh category. I feel like I maybe missed a couple things on there. Let's see what else. What else is in there? We got the equals mountain. All right, I won't fight against that one. I think the equals mountain is super cool, but I don't know if I'd like. I don't know if it's like solidly cool, but I think custom full sizes are cool just by default because they're so rare. Um,
And yet you've said the Southpaw full size wasn't.
the Southpaw full size has other
That's
issues,
true. That's true.
so I give the honey board in pretty low meh. I think the honey board's actually probably a higher meh.
I think we
Um,
originally put it there because no one really thought it was special in any way.
the board sounds so. Interestingly enough, uh, I have one right here.
Ooh.
So yeah, so I've actually used this quite a bit, and I think there is a case to be said of like it's not super interesting, right? The design is like really basic. There's no weight. You know, there's not like a whole lot of bells and whistles or like curves. It's a pretty standard looking sandwich mount keyboard. The only reason that this is like any cooler than like low meh in my eyes is the kind of sound chambers they have cut on the inside of it, which is kind of hard to see. I realize, but that actually, despite this having like a very universal plate, which usually just leaks sound left and right.
Yeah.
I hate universal plates. Let's be real; they're just bad. It's just bad. But even with a universal plate, this keyboard sounds surprisingly good. And this came out at a time when we were kind of starting to see the community shift a lot from specifically like just how good a keyboard feels to how good a keyboard sounds. Nowadays, sound is as important, if not more important, to a lot of people than the feel of a keyboard, which is sort of valid, I suppose. And you know, this was kind of, to me at least at the time, sort of a revolution in the way that a keyboard could have like a universal plate and like not be very special, but still sound very interesting based off one design choice they decided to do in the
Hmm.
inside of the bottom. So I would argue this is higher than low meh. I would
Okay.
put this towards the top of meh because it's a board that surprised me. Although it's not like incredible and amazing, and I think everyone needs to have it. This board surprised me, and for that, I think it maybe deserves to be a little
Okay.
higher.
Let's do this major shifter row. The lowest of the most cool meh column.
10 strong says like my honey board sounds unreal. Yeah, I mean it in terms of specifically like sound, people that want that kind of like deeper, like thockier sound, this board punches like above the way it looks.
Interesting. Well,
Uh,
that's definitely makes it cooler.
yeah. Aside from that, it's a fairly average board. Like otherwise, like it's pretty predictable. That's kind of just like the big selling point of it. I think was just kind of the unique sound. See, I got no issues with the honey board. I wish it shipped if it shipped with like a fixed plate. I think that'd be nuts. Like a fixed
Ooh.
plate in this would be incredible. But even with the universal plate, I was like, this board sounds very nice. And I just had like I just went something basic and familiar. I had just Gateron like yellows in there, or like glow in the dark Gaterons, which were Gateron yellows, just glow in the dark.
Yeah.
And lube those up, and yeah, sound and felt pretty darn good.
Sounds good.
Okay, yeah, I can agree with that. Definitely a bit higher on the mess scale there. All right, I think I'm good with the board actually.
Hey, I think the board's in a really good spot. Let me see if I can just nudge Gatoron just a little bit higher.
Yeah, get her on.
Oh wait, I can't even. I locked his lair. I physically can't touch him.
You know what? That says enough about it already. You know, that's a good thing.
I forgot. I totally forgot I did that.
You know it's top WoW when you've made it like much harder to be moved.
It is actually untouchable, like kind of like the WoW tag. The tags on top.
Yeah.
That is
Yeah.
actually amazing.
This is pretty good. This is pretty good.
Future episodes are going to start getting a lot harder before the next big review like this because so the main thing I'm doing this season, unlike the other seasons, is basically unlike the old seasons. There's no overlap. I'm not going to allow like boards to truly overlap. Boards will take a slot, which means each column has a number amount of slots. There's only 3 columns per category. So if something is going to be cool and we're running out of cool space, something has to be booted up or down.
I think that's fine. That's kind of like the evolution of the way the show goes anyways, right? Like as you encounter more information, you have to start reevaluating some of the previous information because I mean, no one remembers all of this stuff off the top of their head, right? Like usually you encounter a board or a couple boards and you're like, "Okay, now let me start remembering all these kind of ins and outs of them." And then you can kind of adjust accordingly. Like I mentioned earlier, like we grow with experience and information, and just always staying stagnant isn't necessarily a good thing, especially in keyboards. So I think that's totally fine. I think we did a pretty good job kind of placing things today, replacing some things today. And I think it probably should set you up for a bit more success moving forward.
Sake, this is a typical Gaussian distribution. That's how I know that's how I know the show is working, because it should look like a standard bell curve, basically, with a few yikes, a lot of mez, a lot of cools, a few
exactly.
Rocks.
Yeah. I mean, there shouldn't be any like WoW is it changed something major in your life or in the community. And yikes is like basically the same thing, but for the negative. And like most, and you're right. I mean, most things are either meh or cool, and I feel like I pretty much agree with that. My baseline is pretty low.
Like the only thing I can say is like I'm sorry to everyone who had to learn about the MD650L and Expos today. Your life would actually be better if you've never learned about these keyboards.
Yeah, those are
the fact that you had to commit like brain cells to think which one you'd rather use is probably the most detrimental thing that has happened to you today. I apologize for that.
Gio's really upset about the Tengu placement. Do you even own a Tengu, Gio?
I'm pretty sure he does. Why would he be this passionate?
I'm gonna be honest with you. I'm gonna be real. I don't think Gio owns a Tengu. I don't think. I could be wrong, but I don't think he owns a Tengu. I own a Tengu, and I'm like more or less fine with where it is. I mean, it's a cool board, and it's in the cool category. Like, what more do you want?
You're absolutely right. He does not.
I mean, it is pretty, and it's in the cool category. Cool is like by default above average, right? Like we're not bashing on the Tengu. The Tengu's a cool board, and it's in the cool segment. I don't have any issue with that.
I've never seen someone stand for a board so hard that they don't own.
It's below shit boards. All right, what is? What, I don't know, man.
Let me do my YouTube outro, and then we'll do the post-show discussions and analysis.
All right.
And we'll
enough.
get into Geo being Geo. Well, you heard me, everyone. Thanks so much for watching over on YouTube. And hey, I stream every Thursday for the Cool Board, and I occasionally stream other times, but just expect mostly streams for the Cool Board until I announce otherwise. I have videos every week for This Week in Keyboards, and eventually some reviews and other stuff. Yada, yada, yada. Like, subscribe. You know the standard bullshit. And hey, don't forget to check out Quakemz over on TopClack, twitch.tv/TopClack. Yeah, they're doing some cool stuff over there. Brian and Jay put on a pretty interesting show, pretty good show. You guys should check it out every Wednesday whenever I'm at work, so I can't ever watch it. But if it works during your time.
We do it Fridays now. So we do Fridays 1 p.m. Pacific for our kind of like discussion stream, which is like super freeform. A couple weeks ago we played a game. The week after that we had like a really, really kind of deep, like epic discussion. And then in last week, we literally just looked at a poster. So like we do like literally anything. But Mondays, 4 p.m. Pacific, I do what I've been calling Mental Health Mondays, which is kind of like a mental health focused keyboard stream, where it is a build stream, but we do talk a little bit about mental health as well as some other stuff. It's a good chill time. So that's what I've been doing lately.
Awesome. Yeah, everyone check it out. Thank you so much for watching on the YouTube. And hey, if you want to get involved in the conversation, head over to my Twitch, twitch.tv/manofinters. Follow me so you can be aware of when the next stream goes live, and you can give your own opinion, whether it be right or wrong, about if a keyboard is cool or not. Thanks everyone so much for watching on YouTube, and don't forget, keep on keyboarding. Pew, 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 pew.